professor of pharmacy at Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 76, Encounter in Yorkshire. I hope not. Then go to hell. The tall man had just started when Christie across from him suddenly started to move. The 8 o'clock episode that lasted 4,000 of episodes in her mind finally came to an end. She and Alexis left peacefully on the same day, bathing in the sunshine and spring breeze. They hugged each other tightly until death. Their descendants buried them in a sea of flowers. The tall and strong man never expected that Christie would suddenly turn against him, and he was accidentally petrified on the spot. Christie succeeded with one move and took advantage of the victory. Before the werewolves could react, 3 more werewolves were turned into stone statues. When she pointed her wand at the 4th werewolf, the werewolves finally reacted and swarmed forward, roaring. Werewolves are not as described in many movies and novels. They can neither transform at will nor become infinitely powerful and agile. At least not the werewolves here. If a werewolf is bitten and does not die, it will turn into a wolf at the full moon. During the time it turns into a wolf, it will be full of hatred for humans and will attack almost every human it can find until all the humans are killed. Until humanity is torn to pieces. No matter how kind and gentle they were. The original origin of werewolves is unknown, but at first wizards thought it was a magic similar to a transformation spell. But in fact it was more like a virus. Rather than saying this is magic, it is better to say that the person bitten is the infected person, and the werewolves are virus carriers. Werewolves are no stronger than ordinary people, and they are no different from ordinary people, except that they turn into crazy people when the moon is full. But because of the danger they bring during the full moon, the wizarding world generally believes that werewolves are synonymous with danger and darkness, and their treatment is only one level better than that of dementors. Even there was a 17th century werewolf code of conduct, which was intended to provide werewolves with a code by which they could live safely and legally with wizards in the magical world. But in fact, the above provisions are more about the behavioral constraints of werewolves. Due to this long-term discrimination and prejudice, werewolves are at the bottom of society. They are poor and cannot find jobs. No one wants to mention them or even see them. In addition, during the Voldemort War more than 10 years ago, a large number of werewolves joined Voldemort's camp, which made their situation even more difficult. And what Christie said, werewolves deserve to die, and what the Lame werewolf asked, is it because I'm a werewolf? Are actually the opinions of the wizards, squibs, and obscurans and the entire wizarding world on werewolves. Christie cast a levitating spell on himself and flew into the air. He jumped out of the werewolf's circle, turned around and released a fainting towards the werewolf. Another werewolf was hit and passed out. But the werewolves were very fierce. They ignored their companions, as if Christie was the enemy who killed his father. They turned around and swarmed up, continuing to rush towards Christie. Bones in pieces since the war, Christie has used a dangerous spell for the first time. Seeing that the crushing curse was about to hit the Lame man, Christie could almost predict that the next moment, 2 seconds later, the Lame man would be reduced to a pile of minced meat under the influence of the crushing curse boom. However, things didn't turn out the way Christie expected. A flash of protection flashed in front of the Lame man, blocking Christie's crushing curse. All petrochemical, the Lame man held a wand wrapped with tape, his face full of anger, and he roared ferociously. A black light shot out from the tip of the wand and hit Christie's face. Christie was calm and waved the wand in her hand, and there was a popping sound in the air. Apparition, her figure moved sideways out of thin air and flashed into the middle of the road, escaping the Lame man's spell. Thump. The Lame man's spell focused on the iron rod behind Christie. After the iron rod was petrified, it fell to the ground. Christie looked back at the iron rod on the ground. A hint of joy flashed in his eyes. It had always been her dream to fight as elegantly as Alexis. Perhaps Alexis himself didn't notice that his fighting style, which frequently involved apparition and high-speed movement, looked very cool. Christie has practiced many times in private, sometimes working well and sometimes not working, but she didn't expect to succeed today. At this moment, Christy just wants to rush back to the Aura headquarters in London, kiss the man she loves, and as for the werewolves, all of them should be gone. Retreat. Burning flames. Christy shouted, and a burst of flames suddenly shot out from the tip of the staff, rushing toward the werewolves. She held the wand, and continued to breathe out fire, letting the flames isolate the werewolves. Just as Christy was about to leave, a strange voice suddenly came from behind. "Christy, let's go." The familiar figure appeared in the window on the second floor, grabbed Christy, and pulled Christy into the building under the barrier of the flames. Without Christy's support, the flame quickly died out. The lame man and the tall man were furious when they saw that Christy had disappeared after the flames. She must be found. The tall man grabbed the lame leg by his collar and growled. Boss Fenry said that she is the woman of that little bastard Alexis. Alexis is the adopted son of Dumbledore and Grindelwald. As long as you control her, you can control Alexis smashing. If you control Alexis, you can control Dumbledore, and even get on the line with Grindelwald. It's even possible to get them to support us werewolves. So, go find her immediately. She must not be allowed to leave Yorkshire. Christy doesn't know yet that the werewolf's target is her, and she doesn't even know that the werewolf thinks she's already with Alexis. If she knew, she might have a different view of the werewolves. In fact, she felt something was wrong from beginning to end of this pursuit. Rufus commented more than once that Christy was a smart and courageous Aura and a role model for the Auras. Rufus was right, at least as long as Alexis wasn't involved. During the initial hunt for the wandering werewolf tribe, Christy was the first Aura to spot traces. It was she and her colleagues who blocked Lame and others in the community. Things are pretty normal up to this point. When Christy breaks into the community, things start to get weird. The group of werewolves she had blocked in the room were very well behaved. They raised their hands obediently, squatted in rows in the corner, and stared at her intently. Then the lame man told her that there was a letter on the table, which was addressed to her. The letter was unsigned and unsealed. After she opened it, a bookmark fell out. Then Christy's expression changed. Chapter 77. Some people are busy fighting, and some people. This bookmark was so familiar to her. When Alexis was in school, she had such a leaf tag in her textbook. One time, when Alexis wasn't paying attention, she quietly stole one from Alexis's notebook and kept it. Now she has it. It was tucked away in the diary beside her bedside in her bedroom. It was a tree endemic to Austria. She had asked Alexis, but it was not found in England. Of course, Christy thought the letter was related to Alexis, so she put away the leaves and quickly read down. As a result, the letter paper sandwiched inside was blank. Then, the werewolves began to flee. Christy had to catch up, and this pursuit led him to Yorkshire. Things were already very wrong at this point, but what was waiting for Christy was even worse. That shy little boy who doesn't talk much, who is overprotected by Alexis, is here too. Seeing the werewolves outside dispersed, Lupin sat on the floor leaning against the wall under the windowsill, tilting his head to look at Christy. At this time, Christy's eyes were dull, her hands were tightly holding the wand, her nostrils were flaring, and she was muttering, not knowing what she was saying silently. "Christy?" Lupin called softly. He knew Christy. She had been pestering Alexis when she was a student, trying to get in among them. Unfortunately, Alexis thought she was too stupid and was too lazy to pay attention to her. In fact, almost everyone around Alexis could tell that Christy liked him, but Alexis didn't feel anything at all. They even made a bet with Alexis and won Alexis to make snacks for them for a month. When they were laughing at Alexis's slow reaction, Lupin didn't know that a certain girl had made up a series of rumors about him and Alexis behind his back, preparing to spread them everywhere because of being rejected by him. Unfortunately, these rumors were promptly squashed by Christy, who was keeping a close eye on Alexis. "Have you met Felix?" Christy suddenly pointed her wand at Lupin, her eyes fixed on Lupin, ready to completely destroy this guy who only knew how to hide behind Alexis, as long as Lupin nodded. Forehead. Lupin was momentarily at a loss for words. No. He shook his head and pointed at himself and then at the sloppy room with some dejection. "The management of werewolves in Yorkshire is not that strict. I have been living here since 10 years ago. Alexis is back." Lupin's news was very limited. He didn't know that Alexis had returned to Hogwarts, let alone that James' son, Harry Potter, had entered Hogwarts, not even knowing that Peter Pettigrew had been killed by Sirius Black. Christy stared at Lupin for a while and was relieved to see that he didn't seem to be lying. She put her wand away and took out the leaf and showed it to Lupin. This thing was given to me by those werewolves. Do you know where it came from? In Christy's memory, Alexis loved tinkering with these flowers and plants, and Lupin was often with Alexis, so maybe he knew the origin of the bookmarks. Lupin took a look. The leaf was oval in shape, with complete veins. It was sandwiched between two pieces of thin transparent glass. It had obviously been carefully processed. This is an Austrian oak leaf, Lupin said. Alexis likes to use it as a bookmark. What happened? Is it rare? Christy asked. I heard it's only found in Austria. Lupin shook his head. He and Alexis were good friends. Alexis liked to tinker with flowers and plants. They stayed together all day long, and they got to know each other a little bit. Very common. As he spoke, Lupin pointed out the window. There are them over there, and on both sides of the highway. What's wrong? Christy lay on the window and looked out. In front of the building where they were, a two-story tree towered in front of her. The tree's crown was so large that some of its branches even touched the window. Christy sat back on the floor silently, her eyes dull. What happened? Lupin asked, concerned. Nothing. Christy shook her head and put the bookmark away. Since it has nothing to do with Alexis, then everything is fine. After confirming that this matter had nothing to do with Alexis, Christy's IQ regained the high ground. She sorted out the incident in her mind and was keenly aware that something was wrong. Okay, thank you for saving me, even though I didn't need it at all. But I have to rush back now to report the situation. Christy stood up and walked toward the door. And many more. Lupin stopped Christy and stood up. Alexis is back, he asked cautiously. Christy narrowed her eyes and looked at Lupin. At this time, Lupin was wearing a black jacket with peeling paint on his elbows and a pair of dirty jeans. His hair was messy and his thick beard covered most of his face. From the only part of his skin exposed, it could be seen that there seems to be some malnutrition at Hogwarts. After saying that, Christy opened the door and stepped out of the house. Passed out. There was the sound of a spell being cast in the corridor. Lupin grabbed Christy's arm and pulled her back into the house, narrowly dodging another spell. Quick. She's here. Don't let her run away. Go and inform the boss that woman is here. The sound of a werewolf shouting could be heard in the corridor. Inside the house, Lupin and the two got up from the ground. This way. Lupin closed the door, blocked the door with a sofa and other debris, then held his head and smashed through the glass, jumping from the second floor. Here. As soon as the two landed, shouts rang out from all directions. The sleeping Yorkshire was immediately awakened, and his lungs hurt. More and more werewolves came out of the room, and dozens or hundreds of people soon gathered on the street, surrounding Lupin and Christy. Why so many werewolves? Lupin and Christy took out their wands and stood back to back on guard. Christy asked in a low voice. I told you, the management here is lax, and it is the lair of werewolves. You didn't tell me this whole town was full of werewolves. Then I'll tell you now. Lupin hit the ground with a shattering shot, splashing a burst of gravel and frightening a werewolf who was about to try. There will be more werewolves coming out. There are at least several thousand werewolves in the entire Yorktown. I hope you won't be too many for a while. Chapter 78. Come on, hurt each other. Unbeknownst to Alexis, two old acquaintances in Yorkshire are facing a siege by thousands of werewolves. After today's class, he was not idle. Tomorrow afternoon is the small class for the 4th grade. At this time, the homework of the 4th grade has been sent to his office and is lying quietly on the table, waiting for Professor Alexis' lucky visit. Alexis looked at it briefly. Unlike first-year students, fourth-year students obviously understand the truth. Even if you don't like a certain teacher's class, you must take your homework seriously. Otherwise, the teacher will deduct points. You doubt life. The content of homework for the 4th grade is similar to that of the 1st grade, but in terms of completion quality, the 4th grade is far behind the 1st grade. Most of the 4th graders were completing their homework very seriously, and there were many angles in it that Alexis admired very much. This saved Alexis most of his energy. By the time he finished marking the 4th grade homework, Harry and the others hadn't even finished class yet. Putting her homework aside, Alexis stood up and walked into the laboratory. There are many strange little animals in the laboratory. They are well taken care of and placed in separate cages. The environment in the cage is also specially adjusted according to their living habits. Alexis observed the little animals one by one and recorded their conditions one by one in the record book next to the cage. This is a tedious job that requires concentration and careful observation throughout. By the time Alexis finished filling out the last notebook, it was already dark outside. After waiting in the office for a while, Harry and others still didn't come. Alexis decided to go eat first. The atmosphere in the restaurant was as usual, and the little wizards gathered together in 2s and 3s, talking and laughing while eating. After dinner, Alexis returned to the office and sat down quietly on the chair. He was a little nervous. After a while, Harry would come into his office, sit on the chair, and listen to him tell stories about the past. He recalled his student career in his mind, sorted it out silently, and made a good draft. Time ticked by, and the students in the restaurant had finished their dinner and started doing their own activities. Harry and others still didn't come. Alexis was a little anxious, and he took out his pocket watch again to check the time. 9:55. Why haven't you come yet? Is there something that delayed you? It shouldn't be. If something really delayed him, Harry would come over and say something. Besides, what else is more important than knowing his parents' past? Snape's office. Harry, Ron and Hermione stood in front of Snape with their heads lowered. They held quills in their hands and quickly copied the school rules. According to Snape, they secretly attacked their classmates and even almost used curses. This was considered a violation of school rules and must be punished. Earlier they had an argument with Malfoy in the corridor. Malfoy scolded Hermione. Ron was so angry that he pulled out his wand and wanted to teach Malfoy a lesson. Unexpectedly, this scene happened to be seen by Snape, who was passing by. Snape was angry that Alexis deducted 17 points from Slytherin. As a result, the 3 of them were taken to the office by Snape and forced to copy the school rules 50 times. They had been copying for more than 3 hours and hadn't even eaten dinner. Copying the school rules was just the first move, and Snape had a backup plan. Just now, he deducted 10 points from 3 Harrys. Gryffindor, because Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley violated school rules on campus and intended to attack their classmate Draco Malfoy. They had a private fight and undermined the unity of classmates. The impact was extremely bad. 10 points deducted for each person. Snape disposed of a small bottle of toad slime and sat on the table to glance at what the 3 people had copied. Mr. Potter, your handwriting is simply too ugly. Copy these and these again. Snape picked through it, pulled out a small pile of paper from the thick pile, shook it in his hand just in time to meet Harry, who raised his head. Snape's trembling arms froze in the air, and he was silent for a moment before he gently put down the paper filled with school rules. It's already very late. Let's go back here today. Come to my office after class tomorrow and continue copying, Snape said in a low voice. Harry could obviously feel something strange in Snape's mood, but he didn't think much about it. Being detained here for 3 hours and copying the school rules almost drove him crazy. The 3 of Harry cheered quietly, said goodbye politely, and walked out of the office. Cool. The 3 of them stood in the empty corridor and breathed a long sigh of relief, feeling quite like they were surviving a disaster. What happened? Suddenly, Hermione whispered, "We made an appointment with Mr. Alexis." Harry and Ron's expressions changed, and they started running hurriedly. When the 3 of them walked into Alexis' office, Alexis was already ready to go back to rest. Seeing the 3 of them panting, he felt a little strange for a moment. He pointed to the chairs and motioned for the 3 of them to sit down. "What are you doing here?" The 3 of them looked at each other, and finally Harry spoke and recounted what happened tonight. At this time, Harry had made a decision in his heart. He was more willing to believe Alexis. Therefore, when he told the story, his tone had a strong sense of grievance, just like the candy was snatched away by the bad kid from the neighbor's house, and he was also beaten. The neighbor's adult gave the poor little boy a push, and it was as if he finally saw his parents returning from get off work. After listening to Harry's story, Alexis said nothing, but his anger kept coming out. He really wanted to go to Snape right now, grab him by the collar and ask him, "Do you want to fight?" But in the end, he suppressed his anger. "Okay, I'll go back and negotiate with Snape." Alexis said a few words of comfort to express her attitude. Harry felt a little strange in his heart. This was the first time that someone with equal status stood up to support him after he had been wronged. In the past, he would either hide in the cupboard and talk to himself, or he could only make himself forget those grievances. "Mr. Alexis, can you tell me about my parents?" Harry suppressed the strange feeling in his heart, raised his head and asked. "Can? Oh, sure. I mean, of course." Even though he had already typed up multiple versions of the draft, Alexis was still a little nervous when the moment actually came. The words he had prepared seemed to be forgotten all of a sudden, and his entire mind went blank, as if someone had used it to forget everything. Facing the 3 pairs of big blinking eyes across from him, Alexis had no choice but to give up thinking and act on the spot. "I met James at the welcome party. As you know, I'm from Nurmengard, Austria. I mean, well, I actually came to Hogwarts very early. Dumbledore brought me here. Although I was not a student of Hogwarts at that time, I have been staying at Hogwarts. Very familiar with this place." Chapter 79. Some people are busy feeling melancholy, while others are busy taking action. Alexis spoke confusedly, slowly calming down, and his consciousness gradually fell into memories. Things that happened more than 10 years ago seemed to have happened yesterday, and they were still vivid in his mind. "Your father, James Potter, is the last heir of the Potter family. Your grandparents only had your father at a very old age, so they doted on James. The Potter family is a very famous pureblood family. Unlike most pureblood families, what the Potter family lacks is not money, but people. The Potters are very wealthy. Harry, you should know that." Harry thought of the mountains of galleons he had seen in the Gringotts warehouse, and nodded in agreement. From the first day he entered the wizarding world, Alexis told him that he was from the rich generation. At that time, Harry had no idea about the purchasing power of galleons. Now, he clearly realized how rich he really was. The Potter family is small but very wealthy, so James can get almost anything he wants, since he was a child. It made him defiant and arrogant. "We met at the orientation party. Besides him, there were Remus Lupin, Sirius Black, Severus Snape, Lily, and Peter Pettigrew." "Professor Snape?" Hermione exclaimed. She had found out in the library that Snape, Alexis, James and others were in the same grade, but she really didn't know that they had known each other so early. "That's right, Snape. Harry, your father, me, Lupin, Black, the 4 of us are best friends. But what I want to say is that many of the things we did when we were in school were actually not honorable." Alexis sat up straight and said seriously, "We hung Snape in a tree on a fuchsia, and this was caught by Lily. She asked us to put Snape down." Alexis wanted to tell everything about him taking off Snape's pants, but after thinking about it, she hid this part. If Snape really came to fight him, he would still be a little scared. "Your mother, Lily, was the one who saved Snape and protected him. She scolded us severely. She accused us of being a bunch of troublemakers who only knew how to bully others and were bullies. But we didn't let him go. James took the opportunity to ask Lily to date him, otherwise he would find an opportunity to hang Snape upside down. Lily said, even if I went on a date with a squid, I wouldn't go out with you." This sentence hurt James very much, but Snape didn't appreciate Lily's kindness. He was a little angry about having his pants taken off, especially when Lily saw it. So he yelled at Lily, "I don't need you, a dirty mudblood. Come to the rescue." "What?" Ron couldn't help but exclaimed. Did he really say that? The Weasley family is a pureblood family, and Ron has been living in the wizarding world. He naturally understands what a mudblood means, but this is the first time Harry and Hermione have heard this title point. Although it sounded like a curse word, they didn't understand what the title meant. Yes, actually, Lily had always liked Snape before that. They had known each other since childhood, but this sentence deeply hurt Lily, and Lily stopped paying attention to Snape. Because of this incident, we have restrained ourselves a lot, and Lily has gradually accepted James. At this point, he paused. According to his memory, James and Lily really got together after graduation, but Lupin and Black always insisted that they got together after James invited Lily to be his dance partner at the Christmas ball that year. Alexis was a little unsure. In the end, he decided to tell the story according to his own understanding. He still thought that Lupin and Black were making it up. We did a lot of things in school, and Lily gradually joined us. The 5 of us explored the Forbidden Forest together, explored Hogwarts Castle, and together. He originally wanted to talk about cheating in Mal, but he quickly realized that these 3 children were still students, and it didn't seem good to teach them like this. Later Voldemort started a war. He believed in a language, and wanted to find the child in the language. Just as Alexis got to the exciting part, there was a sudden knock on the door outside. Alexis smiled apologetically, stood up and opened the door. It's Dumbledore. Dumbledore glanced around the room and understood what Alexis was doing. He did not object, but took out a letter and handed it to Alexis with a serious face. Alex, someone gave it to you. For me? Alexis took the letter with some confusion. How did the letter to him get to Dumbledore? Sorry, I need to borrow your teacher Alex for a while, Dumbledore said to the 3 Harrys while Alexis was reading the letter. Maybe you should go back to sleep. If you have anything to do, you can continue tomorrow. Alexis had already read the letter at this time. He rubbed his hair a few times and asked in confusion. What does it mean? Who is so boring as to send me a few hairs? Oh my god. I don't even know where this was cut from. Alexis carefully sniffed it close and was so sick that he quickly threw the envelope and hair on the table and ran to the laboratory to wash his hands. When they came out again, the 3 Harrys had left and Dumbledore had closed the door and was sitting on a chair. Alex, I think you have a point. Dumbledore didn't care about those hairs. His attention was no longer on it, but on the Philosopher's Stone. That makes sense. What makes sense? Alexis asked confused, wiping her hands. Guan Yu's magic stone. Dumbledore said Kieluo took action. Alexis looked interested. Since the last time they broke up in Dumbledore's office on bad terms, he had never cared about the Sorcerer's Stone. In fact, he had been busy since that day and had no time to care about it. Correct. Dumbledore said solemnly last weekend, Lu Wei noticed someone entering the secret room. I went in to check and found that someone had indeed entered several times. Although I can't confirm it's Quirrell, not many people know this secret. Counting you, there are 8 people in total. The people who entered should be among these 8 people. It was not just 8 people who knew about it, and it was not just these 8 people who entered. Alexis added silently in his mind. Chapter 80, Dumbledore's plan and Quirrell's plan. So, what are you going to do? There are 7 people who know where the Philosopher's Stone is hidden, namely Miss Sprout, Flitwick, Hagrid, Professor McGonagall, Quirrell, Snape and Dumbledore. Later Alexis noticed something was wrong there and knew about it. What Dumbledore didn't know was Harry, Hermione and Ron. Not only did they know there was something hidden there, they had even gone in. What even Alexis didn't know was that besides them, there were other people who were able to peek into a corner of the 4th floor on that lively night. Since Quirrell has gone in, he should already know that the Philosopher's Stone is no longer inside. There is nothing in the broken mirror. There is nothing hidden at all. Alexis analyzed it doesn't have to be Quirrell. Dumbledore corrected. He still didn't want to believe that Quirrell was the one trying to steal the Philosopher's Stone. Well, it's not Quirrell, it's Voldemort, or Tom Riddle's servant. Alexis shrugged nonchalantly. That's the only bad thing about doing anything with Dumbledore. The old man always likes to think the best of people. If it were the old man Grindelwald, I don't care. If he doubts you, you have to stand aside. Since Voldemort's lackey knows that the Sorcerer's Stone is not in the broken mirror, he will definitely find a way to find it. Dumbledore nodded in agreement and asked if it were you, where would you think it's hidden? There are so many places to hide things in Hogwarts, Alexis said. When they were in school, they went out for night walks almost every week. In this way, after 7 years and more than 300 night walks, they still failed to explore all the secrets of Hogwarts. In the Forbidden Forest, the Room of Requirement, the common rooms of each house, the kitchen, the Quidditch pitch, the Black Lake, the dining hall, the Sorting Hat, the headmaster's office, Hogsmeade, the Shrieking Shack, under the Homping Willow. Too many, yes. The magic stone is not big, I can just put it in any corner, and it will be enough for all the teachers and students to search for it for a long time. Dumbledore thought silently. If you want to use Voldemort's servant to find the Philosopher's Stone and set up a trap, it's actually not that difficult. Alexis saw what Dumbledore was thinking, and said since we can't tell where he is going to find the magic stone, we might as well give him a target directly. But he already knew there was nothing in the Mirror of Erised. Dumbledore reminded Alexis. Indeed, even if they spread the word that the Philosopher's Stone was actually hidden in the Room of Requirement, or someplace else, or that they were going to move the Philosopher's Stone somewhere else, this doesn't work either. Because this news is really baffling to the uninformed professors. The magic stone is well protected under their layers of barriers, so why should it be moved? In Quirrell's eyes, this was obviously a trap. He told them before that the Philosopher's Stone was hidden in the Mirror of Erised, and Quirrell secretly looked at it, but it was not there. How could he be sure that it was true this time? We can put the Philosopher's Stone in front of them, Alexis suggested. I did the same thing last time. Dumbledore smiled dryly. Alexis scratched his head, a little embarrassed. Looking at it this way, it seems that he did interfere with Dumbledore's plan. If there hadn't been an accident that night, Dumbledore could have used this to lay a trap. But on the other hand, if Alexis hadn't taken the Philosopher's Stone and interfered, the Philosopher's Stone would have been stolen by Quirrell. This seems to have become a paradox. No matter what, it cannot satisfy Dumbledore's purpose of setting up a trap to catch them all, while protecting the Philosopher's Stone. The two thought hard for a while, looked at each other, and came up with an idea. Guard. The two said in unison. What a great idea, Dumbledore praised. Of course. Alexis smiled proudly. Dumbledore hurriedly left Alexis' office. Soon, Alexis was notified, and headed to the principal's office. Also receiving the notice were Snape, Quirrell, Flitwick and others. Dear Master, the Philosopher's Stone is not there. The cunning Dumbledore deceived me. In the office, Quirrell said humbly, but this time we should be able to get in touch with the real Philosopher's Stone. Master, please believe me again. We will definitely get the magic stone. Last weekend, Quirrell sneaked into the secret room where the Philosopher's Stone was hidden and successfully came to the Mirror of Erised. Then the Mirror of Erised was empty. At that time, both Quirrell and Voldemort realized that they had been fooled. It was Quirrell who persuaded Voldemort to stay and continue to inquire for information and wait for opportunities. At first, Voldemort agreed to Quirrell's proposal, but this morning, Voldemort suddenly regretted it. He kept urging Quirrell to leave. Just now, they were preparing to leave Hogwarts secretly, before being notified by Dumbledore. After hearing that Dumbledore summoned them to the principal's office, Quirrell realized that this was a good opportunity. Finally, under Quirrell's persuasion, Voldemort temporarily agreed. Quirrell rewrapped his turban and walked towards the principal's office. He knew that, if he couldn't get the Sorcerer's Stone this time, his end would not be easy. Quirrell walked into the principal's office with anxiety. Other professors were already there, and he was the last one to arrive. Hug. Sorry, I'm coming. I'm late. Almost everyone's eyes were focused on him. Quirrell's face immediately turned red. He stammered an apology and wrung his hands together, extremely nervous. Sit down. Dumbledore pointed to the chair, feeling a little headache. It was not Quirrell who had a headache, but the other two. From the moment they met, Snape and Alexis were like two bulls, their horns touching each other, constantly wrestling, determined to topple each other. Okay, be quiet. Severus and Alex. Dumbledore knocked on the table and raised his voice slightly. Humph. X2 Snape and Alexis stood side by side, holding their arms, snorting in unison, and looked away with sparks of electricity. Llewellyn told me that someone entered the secret room last weekend. When Dumbledore saw everyone gathered, he came up and dropped a bombshell. Then, he kept talking and continued without giving the professors time to react. Fortunately, the Philosopher's Stone was not lost. He took out the magic stone and put it on the table. The ordinary magic stone, like an ordinary stone, rolled out of the bag and lay quietly on the table. It even smells sweet of chocolate. Whether it's intentional or not, since someone has entered the secret room, I think we need to be more vigilant. I think it's necessary for everyone to take turns guarding it. Chapter 81. Excellent hunters usually appear as prey. Of course that's fine. But what does that have to do with him? Snape nodded in agreement, then looked at Alexis across the table with a sneer. Alexis showed no sign of weakness and looked at Snape in the air, which made the air in the room seem to become anxious and hot. I found out that someone wanted to steal the magic stone. As for some people's childish brain teasers, well, I guess that's not something I didn't bother to play with when I was 5 years old. The brain teaser Alexis was talking about was exactly the level set by Snape, which was a potion puzzle about arrangement. I want to say to some people, this is a protective magic stone, not an IQ exercise for your children. Can you be more serious? Alexis's output has not stopped yet. Professor Sprout took out the precious magic net, the flying key designed by Old Fair, Professor McGonagall's wizard chess, and Quirrell's troll. They are all a test of wisdom and courage, and for some people, just come up with a brain teaser? Ha. Ha. Snape was ridiculed by Alexis, and his already gloomy face stretched even longer. However, he was not a man of words, so he could only glare at Alexis angrily, his eyes wanting to spit out flames. This hateful man burned to ashes. Okay, let's get down to business. Dumbledore tried to smooth things over. He looked at Snape apologetically, hoping that he would not be as experienced as Alexis. Snape snorted and simply turned around, out of sight and out of mind. If there are no objections, let's take turns guarding the magic stone. Several other professors nodded. Now let's discuss whether the Philosopher's Stone should still be put back where it was, or should we find a new place to put it? Alexis said nothing this time. Several other professors discussed it and decided to follow the original idea point. So Dumbledore led several people through the level and personally put the Sorcerer's Stone into the mirror of Erised. The schedule for taking turns to watch was also quickly prepared, with Sprout on Monday, Flitwick on Tuesday, McGonagall on Wednesday, Hagrid on Thursday, Quirrell on Friday, Alexis on Saturday, and Snape on Sunday. Once an abnormality is discovered, notify others immediately. After discussing everything, it was already late at night and everyone dispersed. From beginning to end, Alexis and Snape didn't say a word. The two even almost fought in the corridor over who left first, but were pushed away by McGonagall and Flitwick behind them. As the days passed, Alexis's pharmacy studies gradually got on the right track. After teaching, Alexis began to study the inclusion of magical animals in the classification system. On the weekend, after making jerky for Horn and leaving the kitchen with the house elf looking at the god of plague, Alexis secretly swore that she would never set foot in the kitchen again. Horn made me do it. Alexis left a word and left the kitchen in embarrassment, dragging the bag. He even considered changing his pet, but this thought seemed to be noticed by Horn, who followed him every day, staring at him with a pair of background eyes, watching him closely. This made him give up the idea of changing pets. The weekend is over, and the third week is here. Alexis lived his career as a teacher step by step, and there was still no movement from the Chamber of Secrets. If Quirrell hadn't appeared in the Defense Against the Dark Arts class every day, Alexis even thought that Voldemort had given up on the Philosopher's Stone. The third week was still business as usual. The fourth week came as promised. Yorkshire. Yorkshire has been a bit strange lately. The townspeople became very indifferent and wandered up and down the streets all day long. When they passed a stranger or a strange vehicle, they would stop and collectively stare directly at the stranger, frightening people so much that they would quickly leave. Then they resumed their normal behavior and continued wandering the streets. In an apartment building in the center of Yorktown, the doors to the left and right of an apartment were open all day long, and there were slovenly men and women inside. From time to time, they glanced at an apartment with a closed door. In fact, the entire floor, even downstairs and upstairs, was occupied by werewolves. After they caught Lupin and Christie, they didn't know Lupin at first. They only knew that the boy was an acquaintance in the town. When they saw that he had the guts to help Christie escape, they almost killed him. Later, an old acquaintance appeared and recognized Lupin, and Lupin was able to survive. This group of werewolves imprisoned Lupin and Christie, but did not abuse them, nor did they have the idea of transforming them into werewolves, although Lupin no longer needed to be transformed. This left Lupin and Christie a little confused. But now, there is another problem before them. Today is 15. Boy, get back. As soon as Lupin opened the door, the lame man on the other side yelled at him. Today is the night of the full moon. No matter what you want to do, for the safety of this lady, you'd better take action now. Lupin stepped aside to let Christie go and said seriously, there are werewolves everywhere, including himself. Once the full moon night comes, Christie will not be torn into pieces alive. You don't need to worry about this, kid. You'd better do what I say now and go back. The lame bared his teeth, took out his old wand, and walked towards Lupin step by step. Lupin and Christie's wands had been confiscated long ago, and they were now just two slightly stronger ordinary people. Let's look at the configuration of the werewolves who were guarding them. On this floor alone, there were 7 people holding wands, and a dozen holding pistols on the left and right. Lupin even saw a rifle diagonally opposite the door. Not to mention that their wands were confiscated. Even if they were not confiscated, if they tried to run away, they would probably be served by the rifle before they even ran out of the apartment door. Lupin had not been doing well in the past few years and was living in poverty. He had truly seen the power of that thing. Traitor boy, if you didn't have some relationship with Alexis and were still useful to the boss, I would have stuffed you into the oven right now. Lame almost pressed against Lupin's face, threatening in a low voice. So, before I change my mind, go back. In the eyes of the lame werewolf, Lupin, as a werewolf, not only did not help his own kind, but instead helped wizards. This was a kind of betrayal, which made him particularly angry. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82, The Werewolf's Ambition. Lupin stretched out his hand to stop Christie, who was about to step forward, and looked at the lame werewolf without retreating. Just when the lame werewolf was about to teach the traitor boy a lesson, there was a sound of footsteps behind him, and then a tall man with a beard and a rough appearance came over. Lupin and Christie were keenly aware of a fierce aura coming towards their faces. They both raised their heads and glanced at the visitor, their eyes becoming wary. The bearded man walked up behind the lame man, patted the lame man, and asked him to get out of the way, and came to Lupin and Christie. Christie and Lupin took a step back calmly. They bent down slightly, opened their hands, and stared at the person who came, ready to take action at any time. The strange behaviors of the werewolves in the past few days were all explained the moment they saw the visitor. Do you know me? The bearded man bared his teeth, his face trembled, and he asked with a sinister smile. Fenrir Greyback. Christie slowly spit out the person's name. Fenrir Greyback, the recognized leader of werewolves, is very popular among werewolves, and is the idol and spiritual leader of most werewolves. He is bloodthirsty and cruel, and treats outsiders, especially wizards, very cruelly. Fenrir is particularly fond of biting others, and transforming into werewolves. Most of the targets Fenrir chooses are children. He will bite the children, and after the children transform into werewolves, he will appear again, and take the children away. In this way, Fenrir was able to rapidly expand his tribe in a very short period of time. Until now, even the Ministry of Magic didn't know how many subordinates Fenrir had, and Lupin was one of the children bitten by him. At that time, Lupin's father, Lyle Lupin, reminded the committee at Fenrir's interrogation that he believed Fenrir was a werewolf, but the committee members did not take it seriously, but regarded what Lyle Lupin said as a joke. They weren't even willing to tentatively detain Fenrir until the full moon. Lyle Lupin was extremely disappointed with this, especially when the committee members taunted and mocked Fenrir with his sword intention after announcing his release. This made Lyle Lupin furious, and turned against Fenrir, who was released in court. Swear loudly he is ruthless, cunning, and deserves death. Werewolves all deserve to die. For this reason, Fenrir held a grudge against Lyle Lupin. He took advantage of Lyle Lupin's absence and attacked his son, 5-year-old Remus Lupin. Fenrir did not bite little Lupin to death. He turned little Lupin into a werewolf and was driven away by Lyle Lupin, who returned. Although little Lupin survived the disaster, he was turned into a werewolf by Fenrir. Note 1: Fenrir. Lupin would never forget Fenrir's appearance no matter what. Seeing Fenrir at this time, all the past events kept flashing in his mind. He gritted his teeth and read out Fenrir's name word by word. Fenrir glanced at Lupin and laughed. "Isn't this little Lupin? It seems that your father does not think that werewolves deserve to die," as he said. Fenrir patted Lupin with his big hand with long yellow nails. "In this way, maybe your father and I will have a lot to talk about. You can introduce your father to me if you are willing to join me." "Fenrir, what do you want?" Christy held down Lupin, who was about to go berserk, and stepped forward to ask. It must be admitted that Christy's mind is very sharp when Alexis is not involved. She guessed a lot of things from the moment she saw Fenrir. "Don't you high-minded wizards know what I'm going to do?" Fenrir made a joke and reached out to touch Christy, but his palm stopped in the air. He curled his lips and retracted his palm. "Tonight is the night of the full moon, Miss Christy. I need you to write a letter to Alexis Felix and ask him to come to Yorkshire to see me. How early or late he arrives will determine your safety," Fenrir said, and a werewolf behind him handed over a pen and paper, which he handed to Christy. "And you, little wolf cub Lupin, you also need to write a letter to your good brother Alexis. Just to remind you, little wolf, there are hundreds of thousands of ordinary people in Yorkshire and only a few thousand werewolves. You know, tonight is the night of the full moon, and the werewolves on the night of the full moon will not listen to my orders. Their lives are in the hands of you and your good brothers. You need to hurry up. Of course, I also hope to see Alexis arrive and see your hands covered in blood and what you look like when you turn into a real werewolf. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's start writing." Fenrir clapped his hands and laughed. "What are you doing with him?" Christy heard that Fenrir was looking for Alexis and couldn't remain calm. She angrily tore the letter into pieces, clutched the pen tightly with one hand, and moved towards Fenrir step by step. "You damn, dirty werewolf. Answer me." Fenrir took half a step back, and the smile on his face was replaced by indifference. A trace of violence flashed on his face, which was quickly suppressed. "That's not your time to ask, Miss Christie. It's time for you to write now." Fenrir asked the werewolf next to him to hand over a new pile of letter paper, and said indifferently, while crossing his arms, "Go to hell." Christie yelled and stabbed Fenrir in the eye with a pen. At the same time, a fainting curse hit Fenrir. The moment Christie made a move, Lupin beside him also moved. He took the first step, grabbed the lame werewolf's arm, and grabbed the wand in his hand with his other hand. Fainted hit Fenrir as expected, but Fenrir was only slightly dizzy for a moment, and soon woke up. He reached out, and grabbed Christie's hand holding the pen, showed a bloodthirsty smile, and twisted it to one side inch by inch. Creak creak. Christie's arm was twisted into a strange angle, which made her face red and sweating point, but Christie still didn't say a word. Gritting his teeth, and enduring the pain point, she raised her other hand to grab the pen, and at the same time, kicked Fenrir in the crotch. Puff. Christie was kicked into the room by Fenrir, bumped into a table, and fell into the sofa. Note, in fact, in my opinion, Fenrir is just a person who is running for the status of his own ethnic group. Of course, his actions and methods are definitely wrong, but there are reasons for everything. The status of werewolves in the wizarding world is very low, and centaurs even asked to be included in the ranks of beasts, because they were unwilling to be compared with werewolves. Although Fenrir participated in Voldemort's army, he was not marked. He seemed to just use Voldemort to gain the status of a werewolf point, and even though he was the leader of the werewolves, he was still ostracized among the Death Eaters. As for Remus Lupin, if Lupin's father had not scolded him, Fenrir might not have noticed Remus Lupin at all, let alone bite the child of Ministry of Magic official. It was too late for him to run away. Just imagine, someone yells at you, "Your whole family deserves to die. Your whole family deserves to die." Do you want to take revenge on him? He is an executioner, a murderer. cruel, murderous, and psychologically twisted, but these cannot negate his original intention of improving the status of his fellow humans. In the eyes of muggles and wizards, Fenrir is a villain, but in the eyes of werewolves, he should be a tragic figure who dares to resist injustice. Otherwise there wouldn't be so many werewolves following him. Chapter 83. What is this? Fenrir clenched his fists, walked into the apartment step by step, reached out and lifted Christy up by her collar. Female cousin, if Alexis hadn't valued you, you would have been stuffed into the oven by me. You'd better recognize the situation. After saying that, he gave Christy a hard shake, and like a rag doll, he threw her to the wall and then slid to the floor. Christy sat on her knees on the floor, coughing hard, and blood continued to flow from the corners of her mouth. She had never experienced a fight like this on weekdays. The most you can do is use magic spells. Even if you exercise, it is more about maintaining your body's flexibility so that you are less likely to be hit by magic spells during a fight. She had never practiced this kind of physical muggle fighting. On the other side, Lupin was quickly captured by a swarm of werewolves. Fenrir sneered and came to Lupin's side. Compared to Christy, Lupin was far less lucky. Fenrir knelt down and reached out to squeeze Lupin's shoulders, using his fingers to tighten. Little wolf, you'd better be honest. You have lost contact with Alexis for more than 10 years. Even if I crush you to death now, he will not know. This will not affect my cooperation with him at all. That's right, it's cooperation. When Fenrir thought about it, with Alexis's girlfriend in hand, it would be easy for him to convince Alexis to support the werewolf and cooperate with him. Lupin was just an accident. It's better to have him, and it's okay without him. Poor Fenrir still doesn't know that the relationship between Alexis and Christy is just Christy's unrequited love. Alexis didn't even notice Christy's affection at all. Fenrir almost crushed Lupin's shoulders before letting go. He stood up again and directed his subordinates to bandage the two of them. After the bandages were completed, Fenrir, who had been standing by the window to observe the sky, turned his head. Your time is running out. Several werewolves pushed Lupin and Christy onto the table and thrust quills into their hands. Write quickly. After writing the letter, I will let you go when Alexis comes. This is my promise. Fenrir's promise? Ha. Christy sneered and made a sarcastic comment. Her head jerked back, and she hit the nose of the werewolf behind her. The werewolf held his nose and kept retreating. Tears of pain were left in his eyes. Christy grabbed the ink bottle with her other hand and threw it at Fenrir. While striding towards Fenrir, boom. Christy smashed through the glass, fell from the building, and fell heavily to the ground. Fenrir was startled, ignoring the ink all over his body, and quickly ran to the window to look down. Christy lay motionless on her back, blood trickling out. Go and see if you are dead. Go. Fenrir was now anxious and yelled at the people around him. At this moment, Christy, who had been thrown blind, struggled to get up from the ground, dragging a broken leg, holding onto the wall, and slowly moved toward the outside of the town. Several werewolves rushed out of the apartment and quickly captured Christy, who had not gone far. This time Christy's injury could not be simply bandaged. He had multiple fractures all over his body. Stars were dancing in front of his eyes. He was dizzy and nauseated, and he would say nonsense from time to time. I wrote. Lupin gritted his teeth and looked at the miserable looking Christy and growled. I wrote. He understood that Fenrir's cruelty might kill them both, so he left. No matter what Fenrir wanted to invite Alexis to talk about, it was impossible for Alexis to agree after seeing Christy's miserable appearance. In other words, from the moment Christy jumped out of the window, either Lupin helped Fenrir or they both were stuffed into the oven by Fenrir. There is no other choice. He understood that Fenrir would also figure it out sooner or later. Once he figured it out, it was basically impossible for them to survive. Lupin wrote a letter very quickly and handed it to Fenrir. Fenrir briefly glanced at the contents of the letter, and seeing that Lupin had not done anything wrong, he stuffed the letter into an envelope and had someone deliver it to Alexis. Little wolf, if you had cooperated like this earlier, wouldn't these things have happened? Fenrir crossed his arms, watched Lupin take care of Christy, and said with a sinister smile, now I hope you are really as important to Alexis as the rumors say, otherwise. Hogwarts. Alexis, who had finished teaching the 4th grade, was writing observation notes when there was another knock on the door of his office. It was Harry who walked in, this time alone. "Harry? What's the matter?" Alexis was a little surprised. This was Harry's first visit since the last time he told Harry part of their school history. Perhaps it was Alexis's narration that ruthlessly shattered the imaginary image of his father in Harry's mind. The little guy needed to calm down, and he had been avoiding contact with Alexis. Of course, Alexis didn't know this. When he first learned that the person who adopted him was Grindelwald, the only thought in his mind was, if I had come decades earlier, wouldn't Grindelwald have lost? "Mr. Alexis, I'd like to hear something else about my parents," Harry said sheepishly. "James, he is very good at Quidditch, and is a star player at Hogwarts." Alexis wiped his hands and sat in his seat to preach. Blake told Lupin that many people in school liked James at that time. "By the way, I heard that you performed very well in the Quidditch flying training class?" Harry nodded, a little proud, a little shy. "So have you been invited to join the Gryffindor Quidditch team?" Alexis became interested and continued to ask. Wood wouldn't let me practice in front of everyone. He wanted to use me as a secret weapon." It could be heard that Harry was very proud of being entrusted with this important task. "What position do you play?" Alexis asked knowingly. "Seeker. Each team in Quidditch has 3 goals and 7 players, namely a keeper, 2 beaters, 3 chasers, and a seeker. The goalkeeper is responsible for defending the goal, the batter is responsible for protecting teammates, the chaser is responsible for scoring goals, and the seeker is responsible for finding the golden snitch. There are 3 kinds of balls on the playing field: quaffle, bludger and golden snitch. The 3 types of balls have different functions. The quaffle is used to score points, and 1 hit is worth 10 points, while the bludger is used to interfere with players on both sides. If the seeker catches the snitch, his team scores 150 points and the game ends. In other words, if no one catches the snitch, the game continues. Alexis heard from James that one game seemed to last for more than 2 months. Chapter 84, Fox. Quidditch is the most popular sport in the wizarding world, and its influence is comparable to football in the Muggle world. Many of these star players play the seeker position. After a game, most eyes are focused on the seeker. It can be said that the seeker is the core of the Quidditch game. They can almost directly determine the outcome of the game. Harry is really valued for his ability to play the seeker position. Alexis praised a few words and was very happy that Harry could carry on his father's legacy. James was also a seeker at first. The two chatted for a while, and a letter was delivered to Alexis. After opening the envelope, Alexis's pupils contracted. She is very familiar with this trick. "This is Lupin's handwriting. Harry, I have some things to deal with. You should go back first." Alexis grabbed her windbreaker and put it on, dismissed Harry, and hurried to the principal's office. Password: Tong Tong Petrochemical. Fuchsia. Alexis didn't have time to follow the stone statue, so she just broke through. "Dumbledore." He pushed open the door and shouted, "Oh, Alex. What are you doing?" Dumbledore was sitting on a chair eating secretly when Alexis suddenly broke in. He didn't even have time to hide the bottle, especially when he saw the stone statue hanging upside down behind Alexis. He was even more surprised and stunned. At the same time, memories quickly unfolded in his mind. Alex has been quite honest during this time. It seems that I have always kept my word and have not interfered with his behavior, even though he had a fierce fight with the temple leader. In just 1 week, Slytherin, Gryffindor, and Hufflepuff each lost nearly 100 points. I really wish I didn't offend him. Right, that's right, none of my business. Dumbledore breathed a sigh of relief, hid the bottle in the drawer slowly, and released the spell on the stone statue. "What happened?" "I got Lupin's letter." Alexis slapped the letter on Dumbledore's desk. "He wants me to get to Yorkshire as soon as possible. I'd like to borrow the Fox." How to get to Yorkshire fastest? The Flu network is the fastest option. Unfortunately, the Transport Department of the British Ministry of Magic has poor service, except for a few important departments and some purebloods or wealthy people's homes. It is hardly deployed. Hogwarts is connected to the Flu network, but York County is not. Another option is to use a door key. There are 2 types of portkeys. One is to teleport people to a specific location at a specific time, such as the Quidditch World Cup. The audience will be teleported to the stadium before the start of the game. For example, before the birth of the Hogwarts Express, students used portkeys to go to school. The other is to teleport the person to a fixed location when someone comes into contact. The transport department of the Ministry of Magic has extremely strict management of portkeys, and making portkeys privately will be punished. Alexis did not have a portkey to Yorkshire, and the process of portkeying was painful. The third method is to apparate. Unfortunately, Alexis had never been to Yorkshire, so he couldn't apparate there at all. Besides, even if he could, such a long distance would drain him dry. Judging from Lupin's letter, the matter was rather urgent, and Alexis didn't want to be squeezed dry. But just because he hasn't been there doesn't mean that other man-made animals haven't been there. For example, Fox. As far as Alexis knew, Dumbledore and Grindelwald had traveled almost all over Europe. He should have been to Little Yorkshire. Dumbledore didn't react for a moment. What the hell? Fox? Dumbledore turned his head and looked at Fawkes. Fawkes, who was preening his feathers, stopped and looked at Alexis and then at Dumbledore. Fox? Fawkes flapped his wings dissatisfiedly, landed on the table, and walked back and forth in front of Dumbledore. That's right. Fox took me directly there. Alexis looked at Dumbledore expectantly. Fox glanced at Alexis again, and it could be seen that this look was obviously contemptuous. Dumbledore shook his head, picked up the letter and read it again, but didn't understand what happened. Lupin complied with Fenrir's request completely. He only wrote in the letter that he was in Yorkshire and asked Alexis to come over, saying that someone wanted to see him. Other than that, he wrote nothing. If Alexis hadn't seen Lupin's anxiety from the scrawled handwriting, this would have been a reminiscing letter between old friends. What happened to Lupin? Dumbledore also realized that something was unusual and asked with a frown. No, I don't know. Alexis said, before this, I had not contacted Lupin for 11 years. This is the first time he has contacted me. After that night, I'll go take a look with you, Dumbledore said as he stood up from his chair. He always felt that something was wrong, that this seemed to be a trap. The fact that Lupin was able to send the letter to Hogwarts meant that he knew that Alexis was at Hogwarts. Hogwarts is far away from Yorkshire, and if Alexis had been to Yorkshire, the hot-tempered, in Dumbledore's opinion, Alexis would have apparated there immediately. Using apparition at such a long distance, it would be nice if Alexis could stand when she got there. What if Alexis really disapparated? What if there's a bunch of people ambushing you over there? Apparently Dumbledore miscalculated the distance between Hogwarts and Yorkshire. This distance is simply not enough for one apparition. Dumbledore believed that Lupin would not harm Alexis, but based on just one letter, he could not guarantee that this was Lupin's original intention. What if Lupin is being coerced? What if this was not written by Lupin at all, and he himself was not in Yorkshire at all? He was worried about putting Alexis alone into so many unknowns. You leave. What if Quirrell takes action? Alexis disagreed with Dumbledore's choice and protested. Don't forget, Voldemort is always watching us. You can't leave Hogwarts. I can do it myself. With Fox taking me there, even if something unexpected happens, I will have enough means to escape. Dumbledore was still a little worried, but Alexis was telling the truth. No, it's settled. Fox, come with me. The two spoke together, and Alexis almost unreasonably overpowered Dumbledore's voice and made the decision for him. Dumbledore stared at Alexis for a moment, then nodded reluctantly in agreement. You can ask Flitwick to come with you. No, Lupin only mentioned me in his letter. I believe him. Even if there is an accident, I can handle it by myself. Besides, there is Fox. Fox raised his head and moved his head bit by bit, seeming to agree with Alexis' words. Chapter 85, Reunion. Alexis went alone. By the time he reached Yorkshire, the sun had set. As soon as Alexis entered Yorkshire, he realized that something was unusual. The streets of Little Yorkshire were full of people, and their behavior was very excited. They looked at him, as if they were looking at food, which was not like ordinary people at all. Alexis, you're here. Since Lupin wrote and sent the letter, Fenrir had someone move a chair to sit in the corridor. Seeing Alexis appear at this time, he hugged his arms, looked calm, and spoke calmly. Point. If you don't look at his long nails and sloppy beard, he really looks like a boss. Well, here I am. Alexis entered Yorktown without Fawkes, who was now alone. He responded to Fenrir's words as he walked up, and finally walked to stand a few meters in front of Fenrir. You're still here. Fenrir did not get up, but sat on the chair, looking like a cool, arrogant and awesome boss. Yeah. Alexis nodded. Fenrir was sitting right at the top of the stairs, his majestic body blocking the aisle. Alexis took another look at the letter. Yes, it's this layer. Sir, please give way. I have something urgent. Just when Fenrir was about to say a few more words to boost his aura, Alexis suddenly spoke. Fenrir was stunned for a moment, and could hardly maintain the faint expression on his face. You do not know me. Fenrir pointed to his nose, and asked in disbelief. Alexis felt that this man probably had some serious illness, and should be sent to St. Mungo's hospital for magical maladies and magical injuries for treatment. Who are you? Alexis asked impatiently. I don't know what's going on with looping. Why is this man standing here blocking the road? He also said some inexplicable pretense. Who do you think you are? Yan Nanfei, it's a pity that I'm not Fu Hongsu. What about acting here? You don't even know me. Fenrir stood up in disbelief and asked. He was tall, even a head taller than Alexis, and he was in a superior position. When he stood up, a sense of oppression immediately hit his face. Well, I don't know you. Who are you? Can you step aside? Unfortunately, the suppression was like nothing to Alexis. He drooped his eyelids and asked impatiently. I'm Fenrir. Fenrir Greyback. Fenrir said loudly, while suppressing his anger. The moon was about to come out at this time. Under the influence of the full moon, his temper was already irritable. If he hadn't been afraid of Alexis and the two mountains behind him, he would have rushed up and tore this guy who despised him into pieces. Fenrir. Alexis frowned and thought for a moment, to make sure there was no memory of this name in her mind. He shook his head and continued walking up. Never heard of it, sorry. He was tired of struggling with this stupid guy. There are so many people in the world, but I don't know whether you are from Fenrir or Fenway. Damn. Damn Alexis. You're so arrogant. Fenrir clenched his fists, his eyes flashed with yellow light, and he roared angrily. Alexis stopped and stared at Fenrir's yellow-orange eyes with squinted eyes. I seem to have an impression. Alexis asked uncertainly. Are you the one who intercepted me with Lucius, and was hit in the crotch by me with the crushing curse? No hit. Fenrir originally thought that Alexis couldn't remember it, because he had become more handsome in recent years, because of his self-cultivation and appearance. Unexpectedly, he only remembered this. Oh. Alexis said oh, her hand was a little itchy, but he removed it. I still don't know what's going on with Lupin. I don't want to fight today. The guy who was hit in the crotch by the crushing curse. Please get out of the way. Alexis. Fenrir gritted his teeth. His nose grew outward, his hair sprouted out, and he began to transform into a wolf. You are too arrogant. There are thousands of werewolves in Yorktown. The little wolf cub you raised, and that bitch are both in my hands. How dare you talk to me like that? You are so arrogant. Wolf cub, bitch. Alexis keenly caught these two titles, and now he was not in a hurry to confirm Lupin's status. Did you capture Lupin? Fenrir nodded, then was startled. That's it. Only Lupin. Only caring about Lupin. What about that woman? Didn't you even ask? Fenrir looked at Alexis with a slightly different look. He recalled the rumors that a Death Eater had told him before about being suppressed at Hogwarts as soon as he emerged, and the crushing curse he shot at his crotch during the interception battle at Godric's Hollow. Yes, it is me. Fenrir suppressed the horror in his heart and the burning fire of gossip, and nodded in admission point at the same time. The tone also softened. He went through all the trouble to ask Alexis to come to Yorkshire, not for fighting and gossip. He came here to invite you to come and meet. I want. Fenrir was about to reveal his prepared plan and invite Alexis to join him. However, before he could finish speaking, he was greeted by an enlarging fist. Alexis retracted his hand and shook it, glanced at Fenrir who was holding his nose and looking dazed, and slowly pulled out the wand. Fenrir, right? Shattered. Invite me to meet, right? Intestinal curse. Pretending to be X, right? Disarm spell. Leg tripping curse. Freezing spell. Close your eyes and listen. A series of spells were thrown out, and as he continued to advance, they hit Fenrir rhythmically. Fenrir held his nose and kept backing away, holding his wand in one hand and scrambling to defend himself. Thanks to his being a werewolf, he was resistant to the curse, otherwise he would have been doomed long ago. This feeling of having no choice but to fight back reminded Fenrir again of the last time he was in Godric's Hollow. That time when so many of them besieged him, he did the same. No, it's even more manic than that. Fenrir thought about it, his orange eyes moved slightly, and after seeing the familiar trajectory, he secretly thought something bad. Clap clap clap. There was a slight popping sound in the air. Next moment, apparate. Alexis disappeared from in front of Fenrir and appeared behind him without even waiting for Fenrir to react. Smashed to pieces. A magic spell hit Fenrir in the back. With a scream, the clothes on Fenrir's back exploded, and a small crater was made in the short-haired flesh underneath, and the flesh and blood were blurred. Alexis frowned slightly, a little dissatisfied with the power of the crushing spell. After not seeing each other for a few years, this guy seems to have become more resistant to the curse. Fenrir's back hurt, and he could no longer suppress his emotions and immediately became manic. He roared to the sky, his head completely turned into a wolf's head, his body straightened up again, his spine bent, and he lay on all fours, completely transforming into a wolf. A wolf. Fenrir shouted at Alexis, and rushed towards Alexis. Inside the apartment room, Lupin had tied himself to the corner, and was enduring the pain, trying desperately to maintain his sanity. However, the smell of blood from Christie lying on the other side of the room reached his nose, constantly arousing his animal nature. The pungent smell of blood swirled in his sensitive nostrils, like a delicious meal, making him drool uncontrollably. Just when he could no longer hold on, a slight popping sound reached his ears, and Lupin woke up instantly. Alexis is here. This was Lupin's first reaction. Then he was shocked to find that at some point, he had come to Christie's bedside, and was holding her arms with both hands. Saliva dripped from his mouth. Alexis. Lupin glanced at the projection on the ground, and shouted with the last of his strength. The next moment, the body was getting higher and higher, the spine was curved, and the shadow on the ground was constantly twisting, turning into the shape of a wolf. Ouch! The full moon has risen. Chapter 86, Full Moon Night. Alexis is fighting with Fenrir in the corridor. Fenrir, who had completely lost his humanity and reason, and was dominated by his animal nature, was being played around by Alexis. Even though he was thick-skinned, he couldn't bear Alexis's high frequency and high density output. Kuo's body was scorched black, and he couldn't find a good place. Alexis was about to drop Fenrir when there was a sudden movement in his ear. Boom. The crushing spell hit the wall, blasting a big crater. All petrochemical. Alexis pinned Fenrir in the corridor, turned around and ran quickly towards the source of the sound. He seemed to hear a familiar voice calling his name. Alexis quickly arrived at the door of the apartment. The door to the apartment is open, but getting through is a bit tricky. In front of him, the sound of banging doors and the roar of wild beasts were heard from the rooms on both sides of the corridor. There were several werewolves in front of them who were preparing to get into the apartment. After seeing him, they all turned around and rushed towards him. Alexis raised her arm and waved her wrist. The werewolves that rushed over were turned to stone one after another. Without stopping, he rushed into the apartment. Lupin? Alexis was all too familiar with the werewolf in front of her. He, James, and Black used to spend a night with this familiar werewolf every month. Later, Black and James learned animagus one after another. They would sometimes lead him into the forbidden forest and run around as much as he wanted. Or what responded to him was the roar of the werewolf. Alexis, you're finally here. Christie was sitting on the bed, one arm hanging on his chest, and the other hand holding the pillow against Lupin's chin. When she saw Alexis appearing, Christie was so elated that her heart had already flown to Alexis, and most of the strength in her hands was released at once. Passed out. Alexis had quick eyesight and quick hands. When Lupin was about to bite Christie's arm, he activated a sleeping spell and shot it directly into the gap between the two. Lupin was even more alert. The moment the spell was activated, he seemed to sense the danger. He kicked off his legs and jumped back, easily dodging Alexis' spell. Ouch! Woo. Lupin leaned down and growled at Alexis. His goal has changed, and he decided to kill this threat first. Having made up his mind, Lupin leapt towards Alexis, and then he saw a smile appear on Alexis's face. Lupin was then hung upside down. "You are?" After dealing with Lupin for the time being, Alexis turned to look at Christy. He always felt that this person was a bit familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had seen him before. I'm Christy Connor." Christy didn't mind at all that Alexis didn't remember her. She knew Alexis so well that she was satisfied with having an impression of her. "I'm in the same team as you. Order of the Phoenix." As Christy spoke, she jumped off the bed. The arm hanging on her chest was swaying, making people worried that she would fall directly due to the excessive movement. Like a heartless innocent girl, Christy came up to Alexis and started chattering away. "How many werewolves are there here?" Alexis lay on the window and took a look down and found that the entire York County had turned into a murderous game scene. Countless werewolves chased ordinary people on the streets. They threw muggles to the ground. Several werewolves immediately swarmed up and began to share the food. The other werewolves who didn't grab it rushed into the dark house. After a while, screams would be heard in the room, but the screams were short-lived and would disappear soon. After a while, several werewolves will come out of the house smelling of blood and continue to rush to the next house. Some of them even had strands of meat hanging from their teeth. Fenry said there are probably several thousand people. Christy stood next to Alexis, looking at the commotion below, her expression ugly. "Where are the people from the Ministry of Magic?" Alexis looked away and began to rummage through the room. "It should have been taken care of by Fenry. What are you looking for?" Christy replied. "Austrian oak leaves, moldy oranges, a handful of salt, and peppercorns." Alexis said while searching, casually took out the wand and petrified an intruding werewolf, and then continued to search. "We still need Austrian oak leaves. Do you know where to get them? It's best if they come from the top of the tree, as they are more effective," Alexis asked, holding up a large pile of large bottles and cans. Christy smiled mysteriously. "Wait." After saying that, she ran to the window, reached out and pulled a handful from the tree, and then ran to Alexis with a look of anticipation on her face. "Are these enough?" Alexis studied it carefully, then nodded silently. "Where's the kitchen?" Alexis asked as she gathered her things together. "Are you going to make a potion?" Christy pointed in the direction of the kitchen and asked after walking in. "Yeah. The two of us are still a little bit interesting. I need Lupin to wake up." After speaking, he glanced in the direction of the living room. There, Lupin was hanging upside down, doing crunches, waving his hands randomly between his feet and the roof. Alexis shook his head, turned on the stove, picked up the pot, and started cooking. "Is this Wolfsbane potion?" Christy stood guard at the door with a wand, handed to him by Alexis. After fighting off a werewolf, he stretched his neck curiously and asked. "No." Alexis shook her head. "Wolfsbane potion is a magic potion, and is very difficult to prepare. Mine is to suppress the effect of Wolfsbane potion. This is Wolfsbane potion." Alexis took out a small bottle of medicine from her arms and shook it. "Wolfsbane potion is specially tailored for werewolves. Werewolves will lose their minds on full moon nights and attack humans around them. If they took Wolfsbane potion a week ago, the werewolves will not lose their minds. But correspondingly, the Wolfsbane potion will greatly weaken the werewolf's ability to move, making him limp and even mentally depressed." The bottle in his hand was given by Dumbledore, but he smelled the scent of a big bat from the old and ugly medicine bottle. Alexis highly suspected that Snape had made the Wolfsbane potion. What the hell is that bastard doing making Wolfsbane potion when he has nothing to do? This doubt flashed through his mind. Alexis turned off the fire and poured the boiled Austrian oak sap into the bowl. Open the stopper and pour the Wolfsbane potion in. Chapter 87. Wolfsbane potion. Zzzz. The warm oak sap immediately bubbled up, changing color from brown to black, then red, then purple. A wisp of white vapor rose. The sizzling sound in the bowl gradually became quieter. Alexis reached out to the bottom of the steamed bun bowl, silently assessing the temperature in her mind. In fact, the temperature of this temporarily configured catalyst must be strictly controlled. He has done experiments and found that it must be taken in a fixed temperature range so that the werewolf can regain his sanity and exert the effect of the Wolfsbane potion and also make the werewolf less affected by the wolfsbane potion and become soft. Beyond the fixed range, wolfsbane potion and mitigating potion will all become ineffective. This is all due to the complicated configuration of wolfsbane potion. Wolfsbane potion will become ineffective if even a tiny bit of sugar is in it. It can be seen how delicate this precious medicine is that is difficult to prepare. In Alexis' view, this was a sign of instability. He believes that the wolfsbane potion can definitely be improved, and a stable formula can be found. A thermometer is generally used to measure temperature, and the temperature is accurate to the decimal point. Unfortunately, Alexis looked around and found that there was no place for a thermometer in a single man's apartment. He could only estimate with his hands. "Alexis, are you okay?" Christie's laborious inquiry came from the front. As the moon rises, more and more werewolves mutate, break through the door, and rush towards this side. Don't forget, in order to keep an eye on Christie and Lupin, Fenrir filled the rooms on the 3 floors with his own people. These Fenrir men were now on all fours, roaring and charging towards the precarious hut. "It's almost done, just hold on a little longer." Alexis walked out of the kitchen with the potion, which made Lupin, who had always wanted to reach for Christie, overjoyed and reached for Alexis again and again. Alexis' arms were flexible enough to wrap around Lupin's hands, grab his chin, and then quickly pour the potion into his mouth. Click. Lupin's mouth was covered forcefully by Alexis. Lupin began to struggle hard, making whining sounds from his mouth. A small amount of the potion flowed out from Alexis' fingers. Gradually, the strength of Lupin's struggle weakened, and the orange color in his eyes dimmed. Lupin's struggle became violent again. Alexis narrowed her eyes and felt something was wrong. Should not be, he thought secretly, recalling the process of preparing the potion. That's right. Why did Lupin just change into human form and still not return to his sanity? Smashed to pieces. Christie's loud shout brought Alexis back to reality. "Done yet?" Christie asked breathlessly. She could no longer defend the corridor and could only retreat into the house. "Let go, Alexis. Put me down." Alexis raised her hand subconsciously and then realized that the person who made the sound was Lupin hanging upside down. "I thought you hadn't come to your senses. You cover me. How do you want me to speak?" Lupin was put down, straightened his messy clothes, and asked angrily. The two paused for a moment, then laughed and hugged each other. "Where have you gone? And you don't know how to contact me? It's obviously you who is running around. Once the war is over, there will be no news about you. I was here, wandering around for the first few years, and then I stayed here. Oh me. Gentlemen." Christie blocked the left and right, killing the werewolves who broke into the house one by one. She took the time to look back at the two people talking and laughing, feeling a little speechless. Even for Alexis, this wouldn't be appropriate, right? Christie shouted, "Can you solve the current troubles before writing your memoirs?" Alexis frowned slightly and pulled out his wand. "Fire escape bodyguard." The faint blue flame flew out from the tip of the staff and circled in the air, surrounding the 3 people and isolating the werewolf. Alexis put away her wand and took a chair to sit down on. "Okay, let's wait until daybreak." He put his legs on the back of the sofa opposite, stretched his body, and lay back in a comfortable position. "Christie, can you contact the Ministry of Magic?" Lupin frowned slightly, turned around and asked. He had been classmates with Alexis for 7 years and worked together for another 3 years after graduation, so he knew Alexis very well. Unlike Christie's crazy obsession, in Christie's eyes, Alexis does everything right. Lupin knew that Alexis was a very cold person at heart. If he hadn't been with him for a long time and was a stranger, he wouldn't even look at him twice. Alexis's indifference, which is engraved in his bones, is also something that Lupin and the others are secretly worried about. Now Alexis made it clear that he didn't want to cause any more trouble. "As long as I was happy, it didn't matter that there was a flood outside." Of course, Alexis would still help if he asked. In general, with Alexis, it has nothing to do with what other people do, except the people he cares about. The problem is that there are thousands of werewolves in Yorkshire, and the 3 of them alone can't solve it. No. Christie shook her head, staring straight at the lazy Alexis, and her mind had already begun to direct the second part at 8 o'clock. Lupin turned around and came to the window, looking at the ordinary people screaming outside with a gloomy expression. Alexis. Christy. After a moment of silence, Lupin turned around and looked at the two of them seriously. I want to ask you something. Alexis lowered her legs and drew her wand. I know. Although he and Lupin hadn't seen each other for many years, the tacit understanding they cultivated in the past was still there. With just one look from Lupin, Alexis knew what he was going to do. Christy, you go notify the townspeople. Lupin, go and lure the werewolves together. Alexis quickly arranged the task, put away the fire escape protection, cast a floating spell on the three of them, and jumped out of the window. Gather the werewolves together, and use the fire escape body to surround them. Wait until dawn, and they will naturally regain their senses. Alexis explained, casually fighting off a werewolf. At this time, the entire York County has become a large slaughterhouse, and the werewolves are the butchers, screaming, crying, and running away, or the muggles huddled in the corner and shivering other lambs to be slaughtered. If left alone, these thousands of werewolves would kill all the muggles in the town by daybreak. Alexis waved the wand in her hand, and a wall of blue fire rose up through the streets of Yorkshire, cutting Yorkshire into two pieces. As for the aftermath, that is a matter for the Ministry of Magic. Alexis shrugged and said nonchalantly, they use magic so brazenly in front of muggles, it will be a big problem in the future. But Alexis didn't care. Chapter 88. Quirrell is on the move again. Hogwarts. Today is Tuesday, and according to the duty schedule, Professor Flitwick will be guarding the Philosopher's Stone tonight. After dinner, Flitwick took a few books to the 4th floor, preparing to start a long and boring guard time. The night is getting darker, the students have gone to bed, and most of the teachers have also gone to bed apart from Llewellyn's occasional snoring. The only sound in the corridor was the sound of Flitwick turning the pages of a book. Suddenly, Flitwick put down his book and jumped out of his chair, pointing his wand directly at the stairs, his expression alert. Da-da-da, da-da-da-da. The sound of shuffling footsteps approached step by step. It's me. Don't move your hands. Quirrell's signature stuttering sound came out, and accompanied by a strong smell, Quirrell appeared at the other end of the corridor with a scarf on his head. Quirrell? Flitwick did not relax his vigilance, because he was an acquaintance. He still held the wand, but the height of the wand was slightly adjusted to ensure that in the event of an accident, the spell could subdue the opponent immediately. It's so late. What are you doing here? Flitwick at this time was completely different from the person he was in class or in the bar. Quirrell seemed very nervous. He kept swallowing his saliva and raised his hands. After standing there for a long time, he stuttered and couldn't speak anymore. This made his pale face turn as red as a monkey's butt. I cannot sleep. After a long time, Quirrell finally said it. I see that Alexis doesn't seem to be at school. After saying I can't sleep, Quirrell's stuttering seemed to have improved, and he actually said this sentence extremely smoothly. He has personal matters. Flitwick said nothing more. Quirrell nodded, suddenly enlightened. Nana, Principal, is Mr. Chung asleep? The last time I had insomnia, I just Principal Shen cured me. I want to get some more potions. Flitwick felt a little strange. Although Dumbledore is also a master of potions, he rarely makes potions. When everyone needs this in private, they usually go to Snape. Even though Snape kept a straight face all day long and looked like he would not let strangers in, he was actually very enthusiastic. As long as he was asked for help, as far as Flitwick knew, he had never refused. You can go find Severus, he should be awake now. I'm afraid. Quirrell was stuck again, his face flushed, his lips trembled, and he couldn't speak for a long time. But Flitwick already understood what he meant. It was probably that Quirrell was a little scared of Snape. Yes, Quirrell is so honest, he is indeed afraid of Snape. Headmaster Dumbledore went out after dinner, Flitwick said regretfully. By this time, he had let his guard down. Because Quirrell seemed to understand that he couldn't get too close, so he stood still while the two of them were talking. It seems that he really can't sleep and hangs out. That's such a pity. Quirrell glanced at Flitwick, and his stuttering problem disappeared again. Flitwick nodded in agreement. If you can't sleep, you can go back and read a book. Flitwick shook the book in his hand and gave Quirrell an idea. I remember that you don't have many classes tomorrow. Quirrell nodded, looking a little distracted. When will Mr. Principal come back? Flitwick shook his head. I do not know either. Quirrell nodded to express his understanding, then waved and left. Flitwick put away his wand, jumped back on the chair, grabbed the book and continued reading. In the corner, an invisible wall seemed to move. After getting close to Luwei, he stopped again. London, Ministry of Magic. Dumbledore stood in front of Rufus, and after a lot of talking, he finally convinced Rufus to believe him that there was an accident in Yorkshire and he needed support. At this time, Rufus was contacting the Auror over there, preparing to inquire about the situation. Dumbledore glanced at the huge, round moon outside the window. How about it? Rufus shook his head. The Yorkshire side can't be contacted. There was silence in the office. The lack of contact could mean many things. It could be an accident, or it could just be that the Aurors have taken a break. I'm going to gather some people and go check it out right away. Rufus grabbed his coat and headed outside. He has a resolute character, which is different from most officials of the Ministry of Magic. He knows the importance of the Auror command he leads to the entire wizarding world. Dumbledore sighed and followed. Soon, Rufus summoned a team of experienced Aurors, briefly explained the situation, and began to issue orders. Go to Yorkshire immediately. There may be a large-scale werewolf rebellion there. Yorkshire. Christie had gathered everyone alive in the town, and it was up to Lupin to do the rest. In just a few hours, Yorktown, with a population of 3, only had more than 2 people left. Nearly 1/3 of muggles died at the mouths of werewolves. Thousands more people were bitten by werewolves. Christie can already foresee the future of these thousands of people. They will face the test on the night of the next full moon. Those who survive will become the same kind as the beasts running around the streets. They will join them and attack their compatriots. Is it all here? Alexis, who had been standing there, asked as Lupin ran over sweating profusely. Yes, these are most of the werewolves in the town, Lupin said, and some of them have already moved to the countryside. Alexis nodded, looking past Lupin to the dense group of werewolves behind him. Fire escape bodyguard. Alexis pulled out the wand, and a blue fire dragon flew out from the tip of the wand, circled in the air, split into 2, and flew out along both sides of the road. The fire dragon flew to the end of the werewolf team, turned a corner, gathered together, and surrounded the werewolf team. The blue flame soared into the sky, forming a wall of fire to protect everyone. The shocked residents of Yorktown exclaimed when they saw this magical scene. Alexis could no longer care about this at this time. He was holding the wand and trying his best to maintain the magic spell of fire escape. It's not like being on the Hogwarts Express. That time on the Hogwarts Express, all he had to do was wrap the train so that he would know immediately when a creature was passing through. But this time, he was surrounded by thousands of werewolves. They will not be as disciplined as a Hogwarts Express, nor will they be as cowardly as Peter Pettigrew. The werewolves who lost their minds on the night of the full moon, although they were instinctively afraid of fire, were tempted by the flesh and blood of tens of thousands of muggles. They still continue to attack the fire escape body. This requires Alexis to constantly replenish his energy and maintain his fire escape protection at all times. The blue flames burned quietly. Every time a werewolf couldn't help but pounce on it, it would cause bursts of exclamations in the crowd. When they saw the werewolf swallowed by the flames and burned to ashes, people would exclaim again. After repeating this 4 dozens of times, the muggles finally relaxed. The blue flames were enough to protect them. The relieved muggles began to recall what happened that night. Suppressed cries began to spread among the crowd, and soon the cries gathered together and resounded throughout the sky. In the sky, the pale yellow full moon hung quietly high in the sky, shedding cool moonlight. It seems that he is pitying the misfortune of the world. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89, The Complete Process of the Ministry of Magic. Fine. Alexis' face was pale, beads of sweat rolled down his forehead, and the fine handmade windbreaker on his body was soaked through. He had lasted more than 3 hours. Christie was trying to appease the muggles, but with little success. Lupin hid in the corner and shivered. The wolfsbane potion he took was prepared, and its efficacy was blended with Austrian oak leaves. It was far less effective than the original version. Coupled with the large amount of exercise tonight, the wolfsbane potion in his body began to show signs of failure. Christie felt distressed and wiped Alexis's sweat with a handkerchief. She wanted to say, "We have tried our best. If it doesn't work, just give up." But when the words came to her lips, she couldn't say them out. The suppressed crying behind them continued, and sadness continued to spread among the crowd. Even if it was for them, Christie couldn't say it. "Let me in," Christie said. Previously, after they surrounded the werewolves and separated them from the muggles, they had tried to let Christie and Lupin join the werewolf team and kill a group of werewolves. But the werewolf's bestiality became more ferocious on a full moon night, and Christie was almost bitten. After going back and forth several times, the effect of Lupin's medicine was almost gone, and Christie was too tired. They are almost at the end of their rope. They hadn't thought about sending Christie back to London for help. The two places were more than 40 kilometers apart. With the help of Apparition and Phoenix Fox, the trip took less than 10 minutes. But they quickly abandoned the idea. The three of them knew very well that with the efficiency of the Ministry of Magic, they needed to report, they needed to review at all levels, they needed to send advanced troops to collect intelligence, they needed to formulate combat strategies, they needed to write reports, they needed to get in touch with the Muggle government, and they needed the Muggle government to dispatch relevant personnel. The commanders of both sides need to discuss and formulate a course of action agreed by both parties, and then jointly command. After doing this, it won't take more than a month to figure out the results. Even if the matter is urgent, it will still take a week to start. Even if Christie breaks the rules and directly coerces Minister of Magic Fudge or Aura command Rufus, let alone whether she can succeed. Even if she can succeed, they still have to go through such a long process. Moreover, even Alexis himself was not sure of Rufus' strength in a head-on encounter. This is about following the rules. The Ministry of Magic is the Z body that manages the wizarding world. It has its own rules and regulations. As for asking for help, when you go back, that's fine. But who should I invite? How many people should be invited? Find these people one by one, and repeat what happened over and over. By the time someone with enough skills arrived to solve the problem, the daylilies were cold. They might as well grit their teeth and hold on until dawn. No matter how ferocious werewolves are, they are only ferocious on a full moon night. They are no different from ordinary people at ordinary times. Hogwarts. The night gradually darkened. Ron and Harry were wearing invisibility cloaks and huddled in the corner, not daring to move. "Harry, are you alright?" Ron asked with concern. Just now, Professor Quirrell was chatting with Professor Flitwick. They wanted to take this opportunity to escape, but the lightning scar on Harry's forehead suddenly appeared, almost exposing them. At this time, the lightning scar no longer hurt. Harry slowly put down the hand covering his forehead, looked through the invisibility cloak, and looked at the stairs where Quirrell disappeared, with a complicated expression. "It's him. It's him." Ron glanced in the direction Harry pointed, his eyes full of confusion. "At the welcome dinner, we always thought it was Alexis' appearance that caused the attack here," Harry explained, pointing to the lightning scar on his forehead. "But there was actually another person at the dinner that day, Professor Quirrell. When we were alone with Alexis later, the scar never came back. Just now, it started hurting again. It's all because of him, because of Professor Quirrell. Professor Quirrell must be hiding some secret. The secret about my parents' death." Harry gasped. Okay, but now the question we should consider is how to go back." Ron touched the floor, and his two fingers were tangled with sticky saliva. "This is Luwe's saliva." They were very close to Luwe, and they didn't dare to risk slipping out from under Luwe, but the road on the other side was already blocked by Professor Flitwick. They are in a dilemma. "Maybe we should go in and take a look." Harry pointed behind Luwe. The last time they walked halfway, Alexis took him out, not knowing what was hidden inside. Ron looked at Harry like he was crazy. "Are you sure?" Maybe there are scary monsters in there, like house-sized spiders or something. I don't think that's a good idea, but we have no other way, right? Harry pointed in Flitwick's direction. We are trapped here. Since we can't go back for the time being, we might as well go see what's inside. Midnight. Quirrell left and came back again. He stood in front of Flitwick again with two big dark circles under his eyes bloodshot from staying up late. The scarf on his head was changed to a different one. Flitwick put down his book, had to brace himself, and jumped out of his chair. I left my scarf in there. Quirrell stammered. You know, that was given to me by the prince. It is very important to me. I can't sleep without it. Flitwick stared at the scarf on Quirrell's head, feeling a little strange. He thought about it carefully and vaguely remembered that the scarf on Quirrell's head seemed to be purple before. Why was it changed to blue now? Have you ever gone in? Flitwick didn't focus on this for long, and soon thought of another question. Since Quirrell said he left his scarf inside, does that mean he went in? It's it. Quirrell pointed at Llewellyn, blushed, and stammered. I was playing with this big guy last week and he took my scarf away. You can come in with me. Get the scarf and I'll leave. Quirrell waved his arms exaggeratedly, like an old hen guarding her chicks. Flitwick remained doubtful. Quirrell pointed at the dark circles under his eyes and made a pitiful look, which made Flitwick feel a little soft. I'll inform Dumbledore. Dumbledore isn't here. I just went there. Quirrell stopped Flitwick and said. Then go to Professor McGonagall or Severus. I'm afraid it's a mistake. My fault, Flitwick, and I don't want to lose my job. Quirrell said incoherently, still blocking Flitwick. Flitwick frowned, hesitated for a moment, then turned and walked towards Llewellyn. Chapter 90, Court, Yorkshire. Just when Alexis was about to lose control, and Lupin was about to transform into a werewolf, broomsticks carrying wizards appeared in their field of vision in the southern sky. There was a slight snapping sound in the air, and the old man with a white beard appeared next to Alexis. Dumbledore supported Alexis, who was shaking, and nodded and smiled at Christie, who was nervous beside him. Miss Christie, thank you for taking care of Alex. After saying that, he hugged Alexis and brought him to the edge. How did you come? Alexis asked breathlessly as she wiped the sweat from her head. And Rufus, and dozens of Aurors. They're all here. Dumbledore winked at Alexis and smiled. Fortunately I didn't listen to you, Alex, otherwise I wouldn't have seen you in such a mess. The fire shield slowly extinguished, but this is not important anymore. The Aurors led by Rufus will deal with the crazy werewolf. They also have to calm the frightened people, clear their memories of this night one by one, and then contact the authorities. Communicate and discuss a solution to this incident. So many people have witnessed the existence of magic with their own eyes, and tens of thousands of people have been persecuted by werewolves. This is no small matter enough to keep them busy for a while. Fox, who was left outside by Alexis, seemed to notice Dumbledore's aura. He flew out of the forest and landed on Dumbledore's shoulder. He took 2 dissatisfied pecks of Dumbledore's hair and looked at Alexis. Go check on Lupin. He's not doing well. Alexis sat on the ground and pointed at Lupin, who was huddled in the corner. Did you use Wolfsbane potion on him? Wolfsbane potion was given by Dumbledore. Yes, I mixed it with Austrian oak leaves, but the effect of the medicine is almost gone. Leave the rest to me. You can take a rest first. After Dumbledore finished speaking, he walked towards Lupin. Alexis had no idea where Yorkshire would go next. So many people died, so many were bitten by werewolves. It was all a problem. They left Yorktown when it was getting dark, and Dumbledore took him and Lupin back to London, where they stayed temporarily. According to Dumbledore, they are temporarily unable to leave London and must cooperate with the Ministry of Magic's investigation. Alexis simply rolled her eyes at this. He thinks this is complete nonsense. Anything to investigate. But there was one thing that he was very concerned about. According to Rufus, they captured thousands of werewolves in York County and sent out Aura teams centered on Yorktown and radiating around to track down the escaped werewolves. But among these werewolves, there is no Fenrir. Alexis didn't know how Fenrir resolved his spell. Maybe magical creatures like werewolves were born with a certain immunity to magic, which allowed him to escape from the spell faster. Alexis was a little regretful that she couldn't catch Fenrir. Where's Lupin? They stayed at the Byron Hotel, the same room Alexis had reserved. Alexis climbed out of bed early in the morning. He looked in high spirits, unaffected by last night's events. Alexis found Lupin on the sofa, while Dumbledore was in another room, fast asleep. Alexis didn't know what method Dumbledore used to help Lupin get through last night. Lupin looked a little embarrassed and wet. He was wrapped in his coat and curled up on the side of the sofa and fell asleep. After standing aside and staring at Lupin for a while, Alexis put on her coat lightly and walked out of the room. Hogwarts. Quirrell did not deceive Flitwick. After passing by Luwei, they walked down the passage and saw the funny purple scarf in the devil's net. This made Flitwick sigh in relief. Quirrell seemed very friendly when he saw the scarf, and he couldn't wait to run towards it. Flitwick followed and watched Quirrell pick up the scarf, hug it, kiss it, and stuff it into his arms. Okay, Quirrell, your scarf is found. We should go back. Flitwick looked around, urging Quirrell. Quirrell slowly came behind Flitwick, gently drew out his wand, and pointed his sword at Flitwick. Yes, Professor Flitwick, you are right. It is indeed time to go back. Quirrell no longer stuttered, and his tone was even a little strange. Flitwick didn't notice this. His eyes were fixed on the passage in the distance, where a diamond-like bird landed on the ground. Someone came in. Flitwick's brain exploded. His whole body tensed. He pulled out his wand and walked forward. Quirrell was about to take action, but stopped when he saw Flitwick's movements. What happened, Flitwick? Quirrell asked, following Flitwick. Flitwick made a silent gesture without looking back, and continued walking forward. The two people crossed the long passage and came to stand at the third gate. Just when Quirrell couldn't help but want to take action, a voice sounded, which startled Quirrell. Harry, Ron, why did you come here? Flitwick looked unhappy and shouted at Harry and Ron in the middle of the room. Harry and Ron were also startled and froze on the spot. Just as they were about to put on their invisibility cloaks and escape, they were controlled by Flitwick's levitation spell and floated in front of Flitwick. This is not where you should be. Flitwick looked serious, even a little angry. While he was on guard, two first-year students slipped in without his knowledge. This was a dereliction of duty on his part. Harry and Ron lowered their heads and did not dare to speak. What can they say if they are caught doing bad things? Flitwick was obviously a little angry. He took the two of them to the door without any explanation, ordered them not to leave here, and then asked Quirrell to call Professor McGonagall over. Quirrell never expected that things would develop in such a direction, so he walked over to Professor McGonagall in a stupid manner. After a while, the quiet fourth floor became noisy. Snape, Professor McGonagall, and Miss Sprout all arrived. Ron and Harry were shivering in the center surrounded by many professors. They were both really scared now. Ha! Harry Potter. Snape was filled with a strange expression as soon as he spoke, and his serious and stiff facial muscles twitched. You haven't finished writing your school rules yet. It seems that letting you leave early was a wrong decision. Snape once punished Harry, Ron, and Hermione for copying the school rules 50 times because of their argument with Malfoy in the corridor. Later, for unknown reasons, Snape let the three of them go and did not let them literally copied it 50 times. At this time, Snape brought up old things again, which was clearly adding fuel to the fire. Professor McGonagall on the side was also very angry. Harry and Ron were both students of her college, and the courage and bravery of the Lion College had always been her pride. But now, Professor McGonagall wanted to ask, are you two a little too brave? There are thousands of students in Hogwarts and hundreds of students in the Lion House. How come you two are so outstanding? Dumbledore has gone to the Ministry of Magic. We will wait until Dumbledore comes back to discuss this matter. Now, 50 points from Gryffindor. Professor McGonagall had a serious look on her face, which made the nasolabial folds on her face look even deeper. Let the two of them go back and rest first. When Professor McGonagall spoke, the others naturally had no objections. Snape crossed his arms and gave Harry a half-hearted smile. He's just as capable of causing trouble as James Potter. TSK that's enough, Severus. McGonagall stopped Snape's taunting and looked at Snape with a pair of stern eyes. Snape shrugged and said nothing more. Chapter 91, Media Carnival. London, media workers in the wizarding and muggle worlds have very good noses. It has only been a few hours since the Yorkshire werewolf massacre. The Ministry of Magic and the Muggle government have just received the news and are meeting to discuss a solution. Countless reporters have already rushed to the scene. On to Yorkshire. This small town northeast of London suddenly became lively. When Alexis came back from running, Lupin and Dumbledore had already gotten up. Lupin was arranging his beard, shaving his tramp-like beard cleanly, while Dumbledore was not so tidy. When Alexis opened the door and came in, the old man was drinking juice. Fudge is discussing with the Muggle government how to properly handle matters in Yorkshire. When the old man saw Alexis coming back, he stopped drinking juice and said casually, "That's not easy to deal with." Alexis walked to the window and opened the curtains, looked downstairs, and said with a sneer. He had no good opinion of the Ministry of Magic, and he was even more disdainful of the newly appointed Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge. How could this Minister of Magic, who didn't even have the courage to call Voldemort by his name, achieve anything big? Fudge took over the post of Minister of Magic from Millicent's class last year. As soon as he took office, he made a blind move that made Alexis shake his head. Moreover, Alexis also knew that he would also remove Deng Xiaoping. Bullido's position as principal carries his political thought of, as long as I don't mention it, you don't exist throughout. We can't say that Fudge is a bad person, but sometimes someone who is in his position and does nothing cowardly is worse than a bad person. People like Fudge only dare to show off their power to ones of their own who abide by the rules. He has nothing to do with those who don't abide by the rules and will pretend not to see them. As long as my eyes are blind enough, you will not exist. This is Fudge's governing philosophy. Just as he was thinking about it, there was a knock on the door outside. Breakfast should be here. Alexis opened the door, and what she saw was not a dining car, but a woman. Her hair was done delicately stiff. The weird big curly hair looks particularly awkward when paired with her big chin face. She wore a pair of bejeweled glasses, clutched an alligator bag in her fat fingers, and had 2-inch nails that were painted red. Alexis tilted her head and looked at the strange woman who suddenly appeared at the door for a while, then looked back at Dumbledore. This taste is probably very topical with Dumbledore. Thinking of this, Alexis's eyes changed when she looked at Dumbledore. "Hello, I'm Rita Skeeter." The woman grinned widely and adjusted her glasses in a pretentious manner. A pair of small eyes hidden behind the spectacle lenses moved around in a chattering manner. Her head tilted to the side, peering through the gap between Alexis and the door frame. "Dumbledore, I'm looking for you." Alexis stepped out of the way and shouted into the room in a strange voice. Thank you, dear little gentleman." The woman smiled sweetly and even wanted to reach out and touch Alexis' head. Unfortunately, she was too short and couldn't reach it. Alexis ducked aside expressionlessly, staring directly at the woman, then turned back to glare at Dumbledore, turned around and walked into the bathroom. "Who's here?" Lupin had finished shaving and was lathering up. "A woman." Alexis turned on the faucet to wash away the smell of perfume on her body and said casually, "Woman." Lupin moved his hands and looked at Alexis. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "It's not me who yelled." Alexis expressed dissatisfaction with Lupin's suspicious gaze and rubbed the water on Lupin's body. "I'm here to find Dumbledore." "Looking for Principal Dumbledore?" Lupin was even more surprised. He felt that the atmosphere was slightly awkward. He even considered whether he should hide out for a while to leave some space for Dumbledore and Alexis to talk. "Alex." Dumbledore's shout outside broke the weird atmosphere in the bathroom. Alexis shook his hand, glared at Lupin, and walked out. "Hello, are you Alexis, the witness to the Yorktown werewolf massacre of muggles?" As soon as he came out, the woman greeted him warmly. "I heard it was very miserable there. Can you describe it in detail? Are there really thousands of werewolves in Yorktown? Did the werewolves tear several muggles to pieces? Are many muggles infected? What do you think about this, Mr. Alexis?" Alexis looked down at the loud-mouthed Rita Skeeter with an expressionless face. "Dumbledore, can I throw her out?" Alexis turned to Dumbledore. "Alex, be polite." Alexis was a little disappointed, rubbing her fingers restlessly on her clothes. "I heard that one of the participants was brought back by you?" Rita Skeeter's questions continued. It's been reliably reported that one of the Yorktown participants was a close friend of yours. Is this true? What's your purpose of hiding him? What did he do in Yorktown? Do you want to hide it for him? Yes, I did bring back someone, and you know that person, Alexis said expressionlessly. Rita Skeeter's eyes lit up, and she became excited. Her eyes began to look around the room, which convinced Alexis that, if it weren't for the basic top hat, she would not hesitate. The house was turned upside down. Really? Can you let him come out for an exclusive interview with me? With a new goal in mind, Rita Skeeter immediately ditched Alexis. His name is Dade. Alexis kept making up with a blank expression. It has something to do with you. You can call him Dade. Or maybe Daddy. If it's more formal, you can call him Father. Rita Skeeter's sweet smile froze on her face. Only then did she realize that she had been tricked by Alexis. You. Rita Skeeter blushed and pointed at Alexis, looking angry. Alexis shrugged, looking innocent. The indignant Rita Skeeter was politely invited out by Dumbledore, after clamoring to truthfully report the insult she suffered here. Alex, you don't have to play with her like this. Dumbledore sighed as he closed the door. She asked for it herself, not me. You heard it. Alexis shrugged and continued to play innocent. Dumbledore waved his hand and didn't care. Lupin just came out of the bathroom at this time. As soon as he came out, the breakfast cart finally arrived. Breakfast was served, and just as the three were about to enjoy it, an owl flew in. Chapter 92. Are you sure? Alexis was a little unhappy after not being able to enjoy the delicious breakfast. What did it say? He asked Dumbledore, slicing sausages boredly. There's something wrong in the secret room. Dumbledore had already read the letter. It was written by Professor McGonagall, and it was signed by Severus, Flitwick, and Quirrell. The above briefly describes the incident where Flitwick and Quirrell discovered Harry and Ron in the Chamber of Secrets. Impossible? Alexis asked in surprise as she stopped slicing the sausage. Dumbledore had only left him for one night, and Quirrell seized the opportunity to reveal his true identity. Is Voldemort so brainless? It's Harry and Ron. Dumbledore briefly stated what was described in the letter, and then looked at Alexis. Alexis was speechless. Last time he caught the three Harrys in the secret room, but did not report it due to various reasons. In fact, he didn't think it was a big deal. Who didn't have curiosity when he was a student, and they were caught so quickly? You mean, Quirrell was there too? Alexis suddenly realized something, and frowned and asked. Dumbledore glanced at the letter. It didn't say anything, but it was co-signed by Quirrell. It's not clear yet, it's just that it's co-signed by Quirrell. Dumbledore raised the letter and said so. What should we do? How about you go back and deal with it? Dumbledore shook his head. Let him go back and deal with it, leaving Alexis here to deal with the Ministry of Magic. He was very suspicious. After he finished handling the matter of Harry and Ron forcing their way into the secret room on the 4th floor, Alexis was already wanted by the entire wizarding world. No, on the contrary, Alex, you go back, Lupin and I will stay here. Me. Alexis pointed to her nose with surprise on her face. Are you sure? Let me handle it? Well, Dumbledore knocked on the table. The matter in Yorkshire has a great impact, and it will be very troublesome to deal with it. At this point, Dumbledore paused. You go and understand the specific situation, and then make a decision. Alex, this is related to Harry and Ron's future reputations and entire lives. When Dumbledore said this, Alexis immediately felt a heavy burden on her shoulders, as if Harry and Ron could only rely on themselves. He nodded solemnly. Don't worry, I'll leave right away. Alexis stopped eating breakfast, put down her knife and fork, grabbed her windbreaker, put it on, and was about to leave. Wait, Alex. Dumbledore stopped Alexis, who was in a hurry, and warned him a little uneasily. Remember to keep in touch, and write to me, after you understand what happened. Alexis nodded, hugged Lupin, opened the door and left. The case of Peter Pettigrew's mutilated body has not been revealed yet, and the news about James Black Peter Pettigrew is still brewing. Lupin suddenly appears in this compartment, which makes the media extremely happy. I originally thought it was just a year-end bonus just for fun, but now it seems that the year-end bonus starts with double, and there is no cap. The media in the wizarding world hurried to York County. After briefly understanding the matter, at noon, a series of relevant reports came out. Yorkshire Massacre, Werewolf, Madness, Introduction to Remus Lupin, From Hogwarts to Azkaban, and then to Yorkshire, a brief discussion of Dumbledore's educational philosophy. The number of werewolf attacks continues to rise. What are they going to do? Werewolf, werewolf. At this time, Lupin was just a Hogwarts graduate, just playing well with James Potter, the father of the savior, and his werewolf identity was not widely known. It can be seen from the titles of various newspapers that some focus on reporting on the Yorkshire tragedy, some focus on reporting on werewolves, and some seem to have ulterior motives, from Blake to Lupin who appeared in Yorkshire, leading them to on Dumbledore. They even uncovered the past history of Dumbledore and Grindelwald. Dumbledore was furious when he saw the newspapers questioning his past and educational philosophy point. While I was angry, I also smelled a conspiracy. Dumbledore's political sense was undoubtedly keen, and he had already paid attention to the mere hint in the newspaper. So far, he still doesn't know who is targeting him, or whether it is targeting him is still open to question. Maybe it is targeting Hogwarts. While the wizarding world knows almost the entire story of the Yorkshire tragedy, the Muggle world is much more confused. Speaking of murders, there are murders every year, but no murderer would be so frantic to attack an entire town. This does not look like a murderer, but more like a KB organization or an official secret experiment. Reporters who rushed to Yorkshire even captured teeth marks on the remains. The bite marks clearly visible on the bones were so fresh and shocking. The media in Fleet Street are no less competitive than the media in the wizarding world. With just 2 names and a related word, they can produce an eye-catching piece of news. Not to mention that now there are pictures and the truth. Right hard for me. The editors-in-chief of various newspapers issued orders one after another. In less than 3 hours, various reports appeared in newspapers and were delivered to the dining tables of ordinary households by newsboys. By noon, the Ministry of Magic had determined the time and place of the discussion meeting with the British government. The Yorkshire Massacre was already known to everyone, and was even spreading abroad. By the time Alexis rushed back to Hogwarts in the afternoon, the Yorkshire tragedy had swept across Europe. Countless people were shocked by the tragedy of the Yorkshire Massacre. After being shocked, they began to speculate as to who, or what organization, had done such a tragic thing. In the evening, the Ministry of Magic finally successfully met with the Muggle government, which was busy with everything. The two sides exchanged pleasantries and prepared to discuss the handling of the Yorkshire tragedy after dinner. At this time, rumors were flying everywhere, and demonstrations even appeared in many places. There are many ordinary people who firmly believe that this is what the ZF did. They believe that this is the poison gas leaked from the ZF's secret experimental base, which killed the entire Yorkshire residents. Or maybe the residents of Yorkshire discovered that the ZF an inhumane experimental base led to death. Only 24 hours have passed since the Yorkshire tragedy, which has already shocked the world. As for the British Ministry of Magic and the Muggle government, they had just met and were preparing to have dinner. They didn't even have time to discuss a plan. Chapter 93. Everyone is here. Hogwarts. After Alexis rushed back, she immediately went to see Professor McGonagall. Through the mouth of Professor McGonagall, I learned the entire story. In the words of Professor McGonagall, Harry and Ron, they are just as naughty and brave as you and James were back then. Alexis could clearly feel Professor McGonagall's appreciation from her tone, which made him sigh in relief. In addition to appreciation, it was also somewhat meaningful. Professor McGonagall is a very keen wizard. When Dumbledore changed his strategy to guard the Philosopher's Stone, she had already realized that the person who really wanted to steal the Philosopher's Stone was among them. Therefore, after learning that Alexis was sent back by Dumbledore to find out what happened, McGonagall talked about it. According to the joint statements of Flitwick, Quirrell, Harry and Ron, they were caught when Flitwick took Quirrell to look for his lost scarf. They have no connection with this unopened classroom. Flaws are curious. On this point, both Quirrell and Flitwick have admitted it. Speaking of this, Mag looked at Alexis. Harry and Ron's punishments have already been punished. Severus thinks they should be made to copy the school rules 50 times. Alexis felt that this punishment was reasonable. After understanding the situation, Alexis bid farewell to Professor McGonagall and wrote the entire matter into a letter, along with his own speculations, and asked Horn to bring it to Dumbledore. After writing the letter, Alexis did not go to see Harry and Ron. They were copying the school rules at Snape's place. He went to see Flitwick. Flitwick, who rarely went to a bar in Hogsmeade for a drink, was in a daze in his office when Alexis found him. Seeing Alexis, Flitwick let out an exclamation and spoke first before Alexis could speak. "Alexis, oh my god, I can't believe this happened. You know this, right?" Alexis nodded, thinking Flitwick was talking about the werewolf attacks in Yorkshire. This is indeed a shocking thing. Werewolves have been at the bottom of society for a long time and have been looked down upon by wizards. No one expected that they would cause such a big trouble. Poor Fudge, I'm afraid he's in big trouble. Flitwick then sighed. Indeed, Fudge, the newly appointed Minister of Magic, will be very passive. He needs to consider the impact of the Yorkshire massacre on the Muggle world and the wizarding world, as well as the relationship between the Ministry of Magic and the British government. If he does not handle it well, he will lose wizards' trust, was ousted. This is of course a result Alexis would like to see, but this process is not something he would like to see. It was not worth it to Alexis to oust him from power at the cost of so many lives. TSK Flitwick continued to marvel, poor Fudge, he is really in trouble. Then he realized that Alexis was here for Harry and Ron. I know why you are here, don't worry, the matter has been resolved. Although Harry and Ron have seriously violated school rules, we agree that they are within the scope of forgiveness. Alexis, they are just like you and James, and Lupin and Black. This has not influenced them to become excellent wizards. Alexis nodded, shook his head again, sat on the chair and said, Flitwick, to be honest, I'm not very worried about Harry. I know that he has perfectly inherited James' excellence. I can even see the shadow of James in him. This is nothing to worry about. Yes, he will definitely become an excellent wizard. I always firmly believe this. I came to you for another reason. Alexis tapped her fingers on the newspaper on the table. Quilotta. In the middle of speaking, Alexis was attracted by the title of the Evening Prophet on the table and stopped. Shocked. One wave after another. Azkaban is no longer the most secure prison. The front page of the Evening Prophet contained a large photo that was almost as large as the entire page. Above is Sirius Black's prison photo. Then comes the subtitle. How did Sirius Black escape from Azkaban prison? Sirius escaped from prison? Alexis was shocked. He looked up blankly at Flitwick and then at the newspaper. When did this happen? Just today, when the entire Ministry of Magic was busy dealing with the Yorkshire massacre, Sirius Black took advantage of the Dementors to deliver food and escaped. Flitwick's tone was strange, as if he was marveling, but also seemed to be regretting something. Sorry, Flitwick, I have to go. I'll come and have a drink with you another day. Alexis quickly scanned the newspaper, stood up and left. Hey, Alexis. After leaving Flitwick's office, Alexis stood in the corridor to collect himself. After digesting the news, a smile appeared on his face. He jumped up, clenched his hands, and waved them up and down. His joy was beyond words. Now that Lupin has just been found, Sirius Black has also come out, which means that the three of them will be reunited again in the near future. If James was still here, the four of them would definitely go to the bar to get drunk and celebrate. Alexis danced excitedly, which surprised the students passing by. They looked at Alexis curiously and discussed in low voices what made this always personable pharmacy teacher so excited. Cough cough. Alexis also realized his gaffe. He tried hard to suppress his excitement, coughed dryly, pushed away the crowd, and walked towards the temple's office. Mr. Alexis. A familiar voice stopped him. Mr. Alexis. Draco Malfoy caught up with him panting and stood in front of Alexis. Whether it was because of nervousness or because he was running to catch up, Malfoy's face turned red. He held a corner of his robe and lowered his head, not daring to look at Alexis. What happened to Harry has nothing to do with me. I swear. Malfoy and Alexis have crossed paths on and off several times since they first met in Diagon Alley. Chapter 94. Excited Alexis. At first, Malfoy was shocked that he could make his always calm and elegant father furious. More importantly, in the face of Alexis's repeated provocations, his father could only endure it and did not dare to fight back. Later on the Hogwarts Express, Alexis claimed to be the Dark Lord, which frightened Malfoy. Facing the menacing Alexis, he did not dare to resist at all. Later, in class, when he realized that Alexis was lying to him, he felt a strong sense of humiliation and made him rude. He wanted to change his tone, but Alexis easily resolved it. Then there was the inexplicable deduction of points every time in class, which made Malfoy's life a little difficult. Although Slytherin is known as the cradle of careerists and is good at considering their own interests, in fact they are also a group of houses with a high sense of collective honor. Malfoy was deducted points repeatedly, which made Slytherin's wizards gradually become dissatisfied with him. This time Harry and Ron were caught trespassing in a forbidden area. The little wizard was so suffocated that he wondered what was hidden on the 4th floor and how they slipped in. But Malfoy's first thought was, I'm going to be arrested. How many points will be deducted? When he saw Alexis at this time, he had to seize every opportunity to clarify himself, so that Alexis would not anger him and continue to deduct points from him. Mr. Alexis, this matter really has nothing to do with me. Seeing that Alexis didn't speak, Malfoy became anxious and quickly clarified himself again. Poor Malfoy didn't understand that the real reason why he was deducted points continuously was just that Alexis was familiar with him as a Slytherin, and he shouted smoothly. After a long time, every time he wanted to deduct points, he subconsciously the earth will search for his name. I see. Alexis was not in the mood to discuss points deductions with Malfoy at this time. He was entirely focused on Black. He had even started planning in his mind the celebration after the three reunited, as well as helping Black avoid the Ministry of Magic of Pursuit. Well, Hogwarts is a good place, and Hogsmeade is also a good place to hide people. They are familiar with it, and this is Dumbledore's territory. The Ministry of Magic does not dare to be too blatant. Maybe it would be a good idea to let Black hide out here for a while. Alexis thought so. Mr. Alexis, please believe me, this matter really has nothing to do with me, and I have no idea about it. I found out with them. Malfoy explained eagerly. Okay, I understand, Malfoy. I'm going to talk to Snape about something. Goodbye. Alexis came to her senses, waved her hand, and left in a hurry. In fact, he didn't hear clearly what Malfoy said. Finished. Malfoy stared blankly at Alexis's back, his mind filled with scenes of being deducted points in class. He just laughed at Harry and got 3 points. This time Harry violated school rules. How many points would he get? Thinking of this, and then imagining that he had caused Slytherin to lose the qualification to compete for the Academy Cup Championship, Malfoy almost burst into tears. Alexis came to Snape's office and opened the door directly. As expected, Harry, Ron, and Hermione were copying school rules here, while Snape was reading the newspaper. Evening Prophet. Alexis glanced at the newspaper to make sure that Snape also knew about Black's escape. Snape, I don't want to quarrel with you today. I want to take Harry away for a while. You know the reason. Alexis stretched out her finger and tapped the newspaper. Snape put down the newspaper with a strange expression on his face that Alexis couldn't understand what he was thinking. But it didn't matter what he was thinking. The important thing was that Alexis was excited now. The 3 Harrys were painfully copying the school rules. Their eyes lit up when they heard this, and they all looked up at Alexis and then looked at Snape expectantly. Your punishment is not over yet. After Snape said this, he waved his hand to Alexis to take them away quickly. Alexis was completely excited at this time and didn't care about Snape's attitude. He even nodded at Snape and then led the 3 little guys out of the office. It's a bit of a personal matter. It's about Harry. Harry, you decide whether you want to tell it to your friends or whether you want your friends to follow you and listen together. The 3 of them looked at each other and asked Harry to choose. Harry naturally chose to share the secret with Ron and Hermione. This was not beyond Alexis' expectations. He led the 3 of them into the office, closed the door, and could no longer contain his excitement. He jumped slightly on the spot, clenched his fists and waved, shouting yes, yes. The 3 little guys looked puzzled. If Alexis hadn't behaved normally before, they would have thought this was a sign of going crazy. After celebrating, Alexis rummaged around on the table and found the latest issue of the Evening Prophet. He opened the front page and showed it to the three of them. Dang 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 dang. Take a look. What is this? Alexis held up the newspaper and looked at the three of them expectantly. The three Harrys moved closer to the newspaper, shocked. One wave after another. Azkaban is no longer the most secure prison. Ron frowned as he read the title, looking confused. How did Sirius Black escape from Azkaban prison? Hermione read the subtitle. The two looked at each other and both looked at Harry. They didn't understand why Alexis was so excited about a prisoner escape case. Point could it be that their little friend Harry was hiding some secrets that they didn't know about? Seeing that Harry had the same puzzled expression on his face, Hermione and Ron turned their attention to Alexis. I don't understand. Does this have anything to do with it? Ron asked directly. Hermione thought for a while, looked at the news headlines again, and considered her guess. I remember you said that Harry's father had a good friend named Sirius Black. That's right. Alexis snapped her fingers, put down the newspaper, and praised happily. Clever. Harry. He turned his gaze to Harry, his eyes becoming earnest. Sirius Black was imprisoned unjustly. For so many years, the Wizengamot had only announced that he betrayed and killed James and Lily, your parents. The murderer has never produced evidence. But we all know that he was wrongly accused. He was the scapegoat made by those incompetent guys. And because of his guilt towards James and Lily, poor Black acquiesced to everything and voluntarily atoned for his sins in Azkaban. After the real murderer, Peter Pettigrew, was arrested a few days ago, there is still no news about Black's case. The amount of information Alexis said was a bit large. To those who had experienced that night in Godric's Hollow, it could clear their minds very well, but to Harry and others, it seemed a bit fanciful. Damn it. What is going on, Mr. Alexis? Hermione helped Harry ask his doubts. Chapter 95. Listening to Alexis' past stories. Sirius Black is Harry's godfather. Alexis sat down and recounted the past events. I have told you before that I, Lupin, Black and James were very good friends when they were students. Then after graduation, we devoted ourselves to fighting Voldemort. During this period, Sybil Trelawney, the divination teacher, wrote a letter to Dumbledore and wanted to apply for the position of divination teacher at Hogwarts. The three of Harry looked at each other. Although they didn't know why Alexis suddenly changed the topic to Trelawney, they still listened obediently. In order to successfully apply for the job, Trelawney showed Dumbledore his prophecy. After a pause, Alexis said in a low tone, Trelawney predicted that the family that had escaped the Dark Lord 3 times would give birth to a baby boy at the end of July, and that this baby boy would defeat the Dark Lord. Divination is an elective course that can only be taken in the 3rd year. Unlike Alexis's potion, it is the only course that can be taken by all grades. Although most people think that Trelawney is an old woman who relies on the shadow of her ancestors to appear spiritual, Alexis does not think so, especially after all her prophecies came true. Alexis, I have to admit that divination is really a profound knowledge. No one at the time took Professor Trelawney's prophecy to heart, except for 2 people. Alexis held up 2 fingers and shook them. One was a person who overheard the first half of the language outside the door. The interview was at the Pig's Head Bar, the one in Hogsmeade. He only heard the first half of the prophecy and was kicked out by the bar owner. This man informed Voldemort of the prophecy, and Voldemort was the second person to believe the prophecy. After receiving the prophecy, Voldemort began to look for a target. In the end, he targeted you, Harry. Alexis looked at Harry, paused briefly to let the 3 of them digest, and then said there were 2 suspicious targets at that time. One was you, and the other was Neville of the Longbottom family. Neville? Harry and Ron exclaimed. Neville was their roommate, and they knew Neville very well. Alexis didn't pay attention to the 2 people's exclamations. He just thought it was the 2 people's surprise at the news. Yes, but in the end Voldemort believed that you were the one in the prophecy. In order to avoid Voldemort's pursuit, I, Lupin, Black, and a few other friends secretly escorted James and Lily, and of course, the newborn Harry, to escort your family into Godric's Hollow. The war at that time had entered its most critical stage. Voldemort's Death Eaters fell into their final madness, and we had to stay away from the edge for the time being. In order to keep this secret, we set up a loyalty curse and I will act as the secret keeper. At this point, Alexis began to look painful. At first, everything was fine. We had a great time in Godric's Hollow. With good friends around us, and the birth of new life, all we have to do every day is hunt, fish, and drink. One night, after dinner, we talked about something, and James and I had a disagreement, because of our different views. It started out as a discussion, but then the discussion turned into an argument. Lupin and the others realized something was wrong and quickly persuaded us. But it was too late. James and I both said a lot of angry words. When we were angry, James kicked me out of the house in anger. And I was angry with James at the time. After yelling at him, I left angrily. Alexis took a deep breath and his tone became deeper. He was unwilling to recall this past. This was his most painful memory. It was his negligence that caused the death of a good friend. After leaving Godric's Hollow, I continued to devote myself to the war against Voldemort. By chance, I heard that the secret keeper of the Fidelity Curse had been replaced by Peter Pettigrew. I realized something was wrong and started rushing to Godric's Hollow, but it was still too late. At this point, Alexis looked at Harry. Harry's body trembled. He had been born for several months at that time. He might not know what happened specifically that night, but he clearly remembered every scene that happened in front of him. I remember, a bald man broke into the bedroom, and my mother screamed. Harry's lips trembled, and deep fear flashed in his pupils. Peter Pettigrew betrayed James, and Voldemort came to visit. He tortured James and Lily, and prepared to kill Harry. Alexis went on to say, but the death curse Voldemort shot at you was deflected, and the rebound focused the death curse on himself. Blake blamed himself for this, because he was the one who recommended Peter Pettigrew. He believed he was responsible for the deaths of James and Lily. So the Ministry of Magic captured Sirius Black. When they failed to find the real culprit, Peter Pettigrew, Hermione whispered the rest of the story, and Mr. Sirius Black confessed to all the crimes, because of guilt and self-blame, and was imprisoned in Azkaban prison. Later, Mr. Alexis, you captured the real murderer, Peter Pettigrew, and threw him into prison. Sirius Black saw Peter Pettigrew. Only he knew that it was Peter Pettigrew who really betrayed Harry's parents. After a pause, Hermione sounded slightly disbelieving. So, what the newspaper said is true. Did Sirius Black really kill Peter Pettigrew in prison? Alexis nodded. Although he was not at the scene, and did not see Black doing it himself, he could guess that anyone who could torture Peter Pettigrew in this way, that was almost unknown in Europe, must hate him to the core, and the entire Azkaban prison here, there is only Sirius Black. Alexis accidentally told James and others about the punishment of Lingchi. Not many people in the UK, or even in Europe, knew about this punishment. Why does the death curse rebound? Ron asked suddenly. His brain circuit is always so strange. Alexis frowned, thinking that Dumbledore refused to let him adopt Harry, and insisted on sending Harry to the Dursleys, and he had some guesses. There is an ancient protection spell, we call it the blood protection spell. I guess it was Lily or James who used the blood protection spell to protect Harry. It was a guess, the one Alexis thought was the most likely. Other than that, he couldn't think of any reason why a baby just a few months old could deflect a fatal death curse and defeat Voldemort. Of course, there are many talented people in the wizarding world, and the history of magic has a long history. There may be some other rare magic spells that can also have this effect, but Alexis doesn't know about it. This is also possible. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96. The Yorkshire tragedy continues to unfold. After the story was told, Alexis had already come out of the excitement of being reunited with his old friends, and he seemed a little dazed. The three Harrys were also shocked by Alexis's story, and could not recover for a while. They still seemed absent-minded when they left. This was the first time Harry learned about his parents and that night so closely and clearly. First, the ideal image of a great and upright father was destroyed. His father was just an ordinary person who could do wrong things and even bully the weak. Then it was revealed that his adoptive father was a murderer, and then the truth about his parents' death came to light. This made Harry a little overwhelmed. In his short 11-year-old life, he has never experienced such ups and downs as today. Never. Hermione and Ron saw that Harry was absent-minded. Both of them were a little worried, but they also knew that now was not the time to disturb Harry, so Hermione quietly gestured to Ron, asking Ron to pay more attention to Harry recently. The little teenagers are still worried about the past events. To them, these are big things. They don't know that the outside world has already exploded because of another incident. The next day, Thursday, Alexis couldn't make it to Wednesday's pharmacy class, so she couldn't afford to miss out on today's class. However, affected by the news of Black's escape from prison, Alexis seemed a little absent-minded in class and even forgot to trouble Slytherin, which made the little wizards very uncomfortable. Although the school has only been open for 4 weeks, no one in Hogwarts knows that just like Professor Snape can't stand Gryffindor, their new potions teacher can't stand Slytherin. Both sides seem to have a grudge, scrambling to deduct points from each other. The day before yesterday, Harry and Ron were deducted points for violating school rules. The little wizards were waiting for Mr. Alexis's counterattack, but this is the result. Mr. Alexis, wake up. Your opponent, Professor Snape, is already a big step ahead. Act quickly. The little wizards wanted to grab Alexis by the neck and yell the above words at him. Unfortunately, they can only think about it. After class, Alexis hurriedly left the classroom with the lesson plan under his arm. He didn't even leave his homework behind. This made the little wizards who were tortured by their homework cheer a little, but then felt that something was missing and a little boring. Alexis was absent-mindedly waiting for Black at Hogwarts, convinced that Black would come to visit Harry. After leaving Azkaban Point, Dumbledore on the other side was not as laid back as he was. The first thing Dumbledore had to deal with was the key witness Alexis's absence without saying goodbye. He insisted that something happened in the school and Alexis must go back to deal with it. In a tense atmosphere, Fudge chose give in. Next came the question of Lupin. Fudge, who chose to give in on Alexis's issue, the guy whom Alexis regarded as a weak minister, did not back down this time. He raised the questions in his mind on behalf of everyone. Why was Lupin present on the day of the incident? The wizards who fought against Voldemort more than 10 years ago actually did very well. Most of them who survived that war chose to work in the Ministry of Magic, and almost all of the Auror Office of the Ministry of Magic participated. That war. If the survivors of that war were to be ranked on a post-war quality of life ranking, Lupin would definitely be at the bottom. Remus Lupin, according to Fudge's investigation, was not doing well. Less than 48 hours had passed since the Yorkshire tragedy had spread all over the world, which led to the Ministry of Magic and the British government to cooperate. Through the British government, Fudge found Lupin's past work records. According to records, Lupin's life was difficult. A poor wizard appeared at the scene of the tragedy, and Fudge felt that he had good reasons to suspect Lupin was a participant in the tragedy. Dumbledore looked at Fudge. Fudge, wearing a pinstriped suit and bright red tie, was standing up and looking at Dumbledore. From Fudge's eyes, Dumbledore read his anxiety and request. Behind the anxiety and request, Dumbledore vaguely saw something else that was well hidden. That is, a desire and ambition for power. This frightened Dumbledore. Next to Fudge, a woman wearing a fluffy pink cardigan was taking notes seriously. She had a broad, flabby face, and a small black velvet bow on her short curly hair, which looked like an old Lolita in her 40s. There seemed to be a strange sweet smell all around her. Her name is Umbridge, and she is the record keeper of this meeting. The strange thing is that Dumbledore, who always liked sweets, only glanced at her, but he couldn't like her no matter what. Dumbledore turned his gaze to the opposite side again. Sitting across from him were several Muggle government officials who were authorized to contact wizards and properly handle the Yorkshire tragedy and calm the external disturbances. At this time, they were biting their ears and seemed to be plotting something. After biting their ears for a while, several officials stopped their small movements and looked at Fudge in unison. This is not what we promised, Connelly. Minister, I hope the results can be given as soon as possible and the murderer can be handed over. The official who spoke was frowning and seemed a little impatient. A woman next to the official also nodded and looked at the opening. With all due respect, this meeting is to discuss the murderer. I don't understand the purpose of letting Mr. Albus, the headmaster, attend the meeting as a non-voting delegate. In other words, I don't think it is necessary for Mr. Albus, the headmaster, to attend this meeting. After saying that, several other officials nodded and looked at Fudge again. Fudge looked at Dumbledore apologetically. Cornelius Fudge felt that his eyes were full of apology and forbearance, which conveyed very well that he could not help but feel that he was in the KO camp, but in the Han camp. However, Dumbledore only read something called ambition in it. Several gentlemen from the Muggle government. Dumbledore glanced around, called out several people's names one by one, and then patiently explained, I, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, in addition to serving as the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, I'm also the chief wizard of the Wizengamot. The Wizengamot is an organization that predates the Ministry of Magic, and now serves as a combination of the court and the parliament. It consists of 50 members. Wizard crimes will be brought to the Wizengamot and adjudicated by a show of hands by the members of the council. Your Excellency, officials of the Muggle government, and Minister Kennelly, I believe that, even if Lupin is suspected of being involved in this case, according to regulations, he should be sent to the Wizengamot for trial. Not here. This case has caused a sensation in the entire wizarding world. The Wizengamot has the right to participate in the investigation and decision making of the local Ministry of Magic and raise reasonable doubts about it. After a brief pause, with Fudge's ugly expression on his face, Dumbledore said slowly, now, in the name of the Chief Magician of the Wizengamot, I request the British Ministry of Magic to formally transfer this case to the Wizengamot Tribunal. The documents and related correspondence will be sent to your department later. Dumbledore nodded lightly, stood up and pulled Lupin out of the conference room, leaving only the stunned British government officials and Cornelius Fudge with a gloomy expression. Chapter 97. The case continues to ferment. After returning to the Byron Hotel and warning Lupin, Dumbledore hurriedly left London. Soon, the British Ministry of Magic received an official letter from the Wizengamot regarding the transfer of all evidence, witnesses and investigative powers of the Yorkshire massacre. Fudge and officials from the British Muggle government were even meeting in a conference room when the letter was received. Sorry, there's nothing I can do about this. Fudge stared at the letter for a while, shook his head and smiled bitterly. This made the Muggle government officials very surprised. They couldn't understand why the legal and political systems of the wizarding world were so chaotic. A number one figure who had bypassed the Grand Court could directly bypass the country's centralized military, political, and legal system and intervene directly. A case. In their eyes, the British Ministry of Magic is the government of the wizarding community in the UK, and the Aura Office is the military force of this government. This bizarre model in which an international joint organization can directly intervene in the internal affairs of a certain political body leaves Muggle government officials at a loss as to what to do, which is inconceivable to them. They have never been the only ones to intervene. Several officials looked at each other, unable to conceal the shock in their eyes. The only lady among them could not help but ask a question. The Wizengamot was established earlier than the Ministry of Magic. The Ministry of Magic in all countries depends on its help. This is a rule of the wizarding world. The Muggle officials were silent. They still cannot accept this strange political structure. Sir Kennelly, is there anything similar to the Wizengamot? The female official opened her palms and gestured to the number 5. The Ministry of Magic? Maybe we can use their veto power. Fudge didn't know much about the Muggle world, so he didn't understand what the female official meant, but he probably understood the method she proposed. Maybe we can try. I'm also a member of the Wizengamot Tribunal. I have the right to participate in this case. Fudge looked solemn and said with dignity, I will contact other members of the Inquisition and tell them all the details of this case. We will not let an evil dark wizard with blood on his hands easily escape the punishment of the law. It is a must. Mr. Kennelly, the colleague next to the female official reminded. Yes, it is a must. Fudge repeated his words without hesitation, and then looked at the female official. In this case, maybe the Muggle government needs to provide me with some conveniences, which will help me contact other members of Congress faster. Of course, no problem. That's what we'd like to see. The female official stood up and nodded. Yes, we need to get to the bottom of the case as soon as possible and give the public an explanation. This is why we are sitting here and working together. Several other officials stood up and agreed. Several people shook hands with Fudge one by one in a reserved and dignified manner, then said goodbye and left. The entire meeting was a joyful one for both host and guest, and everyone got what they wanted. Although it was a little rough at the beginning, the result was good. Alexis didn't wait for Sirius Black, which made him a little anxious. After class, Alexis took out a big brick the size of a brick from his trench coat pocket and hit Dumbledore with it. When he came back from his trip last year, both Dumbledore and Grindelwald complained vaguely about their worries about being able to see him only once a year, so he bought Muggle-made mobile phones and gave them to them respectively and taught them used. At least he thought the church did. But this phone has never been used. Alexis dialed the number, but there was no answer on the other end. He put away the phone in frustration. This feeling of knowing nothing about the outside world and having to wait passively made him more and more anxious. Fortunately, today's newspaper has been placed on his desk, and now the newspaper has become his only information channel to learn about Lupin and Black. Although he knew that nothing valuable would be published in the newspaper, Alexis unfolded the newspaper and read it patiently. However, he soon realized that he was wrong. The Wizengamot Supreme Court actually intervened in the Yorkshire massacre. The Daily Prophet's front page headline was a meeting scene shot from a subtle angle. In the picture, Dumbledore looks around and leaves with Lupin after announcing that he will take over the case as the chief wizard of the Wizengamot. He looks like an old lion surrounded by wolves. Alexis actually felt a bit of Dumbledore's aura from the picture. Newspapers extensively reported on the meeting and its final outcome. Although Dumbledore announced that the case would be taken over by the Wizengamot Supreme Tribunal, Minister Fudge did not seem to give up. The newspaper said that Minister Fudge would join other lawmakers in private to provide a more comprehensive explanation of the case. It seems to be intended to influence the decisions of MPs. The whole matter was exaggerated by the Daily Prophet and cast a shadow. The newspaper finally mentioned meaningfully, is it right or wrong to use personal prestige to influence a tragic massacre? I don't know if I'm talking about Dumbledore or Cornelius Fudge. Alexis flipped through the newspaper again. Today's paper was so dominated by the meeting that Sirius Black failed to get even a tiny bit of space. Putting down the newspaper, Alexis took out the letter paper, soaked the quill with ink, and wrote a letter for Horn to take out of the campus. Go, find Mundungus Fletcher, and keep an eye on him until he promises to help find out about the Wizengamot. Horn flapped his wings gently, opened the wooden box, and had a meal, then spread his wings and flew away. Horn crossed mountains, skimmed over plains, and past winding rivers before finally landing on a magical black market stall in northern France. The stall owner was a short fat wizard with an unshaven beard, two short bow legs, long and messy ginger hair, and a pair of swollen and bloodshot eyes. He had a cigarette in his mouth, and his body smelled strongly of tobacco and alcohol. Like a rag that fell into the corner of the kitchen. Seeing Horn, the stall owner's expression changed. After throwing away half of his cigarette, he hurriedly cleaned up the stall, not even paying attention to the customers who stopped to inquire. Horn tilted his head and looked at this familiar guy, then slowly spread his wings to follow. Mundungus turned into a remote alley and looked back as he trotted. Goo goo goo. Just when he slowed down and thought he had gotten rid of Horn, Horn was landing on the wall in front of him, tilting his head to look at this strange wizard with a strange brain. One person and one bird looked at each other for a moment, then Horn raised his paw and stretched it towards Mundungus. Mundungus' pupils shrank. He untied the mailbox, took out the letter paper inside, and looked at it. Chapter 98. It's time to find help. Coo 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 coo. Seeing that Mundungus did not pay him the travel expenses, Horn barked several times unhappy, flew down on Mundungus, and pecked his cheek with his pointed beak. Mundungus could no longer care about Horn's dissatisfaction. His fear of seeing Horn before and remembering Alexis, the great devil and biggest creditor, disappeared. He was shocked by what was said in the letter. His location is very remote. A month ago, Mundungus heard that there was a shortage of tobacco here, so he came here to sell it. He has been in this inhospitable place for a full month. He knew nothing about the news outside. After reading the content of the letter, Mundungus was a little angry with Alexis for a moment. If Alexis hadn't loaned him money when his Quidditch betting business collapsed, he would have become his big creditor. He wouldn't come to this place where nothing matters. If he hadn't come to this quiet place, he wouldn't have forgotten about Dumbledore. Long before leaving London, he heard some rumors from special channels. He didn't pay attention to it at the time. Now that he thinks about it, he shouldn't have come to damn France at all. Mundungus hammered the wall, annoyed. In Alexis' view, Mundungus was just an option. He didn't trust Mundungus. If it weren't for Dumbledore's relationship, someone would have the guts to owe him more than 3 gold galleons and not repay him for several years. Mundungus had already turned into pieces and appeared in the Atlantic Ocean. Mundungus is also a member of the Order of the Phoenix. He hangs out in various black markets. He is greedy for money and is only interested in profit. He is a typical low-level person. Alexis felt that he could even trade his soul to anyone who could afford it. During the fight against Voldemort, Mundungus was mainly responsible for intelligence and messaging. Although almost all members of the Order of the Phoenix distrusted him, even Professor McGonagall had to admit that Mundungus did his job very well from beginning to end. He never betrayed Dumbledore. This is a very strange person. Dumbledore trusted him. That was Dumbledore's business. Alexis didn't trust him. At least she wouldn't put her treasure on him alone. So after writing several more letters, Alexis got up and rushed to Hogsmeade. Hogsmeade Village, Hogshead Pub. This is a weird bar. You turn out from the post office on Central Avenue and turn into a side road. Walk along the road and there is a small bar at the intersection point. A tattered wooden sign hung from a rusty bracket on the door, depicting a severed pig's head, bloodstains seeping through the white cloth wrapping it. The owner of this bar has a bad temper. Customers who enter will face the risk of being kicked out. Maybe if you step left foot first instead of right foot, the bar owner will kick you out. Whether you can stay for a drink depends on the boss's mood. Alexis pushed the door open and walked in. There were not many people in the bar. An old man with a grey beard, a tall and thin figure, who looked almost like Dumbledore, raised his head and saw Alexis. The old man's stern face immediately turned into a smile. He put down the rag in his hand, wiped his hands on his apron, and walked towards Alexis enthusiastically. Little Alexis. Oh. Welcome. Thank you Merlin for coming to visit me. Alexis hugged the old man and smiled. Uncle Aberforth, how could I forget you? Aberforth led Alexis to the bar, roughly pushed a guest aside, asked Alexis to sit down, and poured him a glass of wine himself. The customer was chatting with his companion when he was suddenly pushed. He turned around and was about to get angry. After seeing that it was Aberforth, he dragged his companion away from the bar angrily. Aberforth nodded with satisfaction, pushed the cup, and then complained, I heard you came to Hogsmeade for the past 2 weeks, but you didn't even come to see me. It was quite busy at that time, so I suspected someone was trying to steal something. Alexis explained with a smile. Aberforth Dumbledore is the younger brother of Albus Dumbledore. The two broke up due to an accident. Although Aberforth still obeyed Albus's orders and even joined the Order of the Phoenix to fight against Voldemort, he accepted Albus' leader, but he actually has no respect for Albus at all. Let his great plans go to hell with him. These are Aberforth's exact words about his brother Albus. Completely different from Albus Dumbledore. This Dumbledore is rude, helpless, doesn't like learning, likes to solve everything through duels, and has no overall perspective. It can be said that he and Albus Dumbledore are the same, completely opposite sides. When Alexis first met Aberforth in Hogsmeade and heard that he was a child adopted by Grindelwald, he almost drew a stick with his brother Albus Dumbledore. In fact, he actually did so. Later, Alexis sneaked out to play and got drunk. Because of his first drink, he muttered a lot of bad things about Albus Dumbledore and was accepted by Aberforth, at least Albus Dumbledore. Alexis thought so. A few years later, during the war against Voldemort, he saw Aberforth's abilities with his own eyes. This unkempt, slovenly and rude old man possessed Albus Dumbledore's magical talent and was focused on it, but not so much. There were many things for him to worry about, so in Alexis' mind, Aberforth was a more powerful wizard than Albus. Simply speaking of wizard duels, Uncle Aberforth, have you read the newspaper? Alexis asked in a low voice as she drank all the wine in her glass. He didn't show an expression at the thick layer of grime on the bar. Aberforth paused in wiping the cup and curled his lips, seemingly unhappy. "Hey, little Alexis, you have no conscience," he said. "So you didn't come to visit me specifically?" Alexis smiled awkwardly, not knowing what to say. After he was brought to Hogwarts by Dumbledore, he spent countless days and nights missing Grindelwald and the sea breeze on Nurmengard Island. It was Aberforth who coaxed him to sleep and told him many rude things. Dirty bedtime stories. "I've seen it, don't worry." Aberforth stopped teasing Alexis. "I told you, he always has some great plans. He always does. But he never thinks about his family." "Yeah, he always does." When talking about Dumbledore, Aberforth's tone was full of ridicule and disdain. "Ah, the great Albus Dumbledore, he always showed his greatness to the world. In fact, he was a despicable villain. He never considered the feelings of his family. That guy, he has no family. So, little Alexis, you're worrying for nothing. You don't need to worry about him at all." Chapter 99. Further development of the Yorkshire Massacre. Even though he had expected it before coming, Alexis was still a little at a loss after hearing these words. Whether it was Grindelwald, Albus Dumbledore, or Aberforth, the three old men who had the greatest influence on him never taught him how to deal with this situation. The truth is that Alexis is not very good at relationships with her family. If facing an outsider, when he hears someone slandering Dumbledore, he can confidently pull out his wand and give the opponent a Cruciatus, followed by the Imperious Curse, and finally, depending on the situation, a Forgotten or Avada Kedavra. But now he is facing his family. Obviously, he cannot use any of the above spells on his family. So, he could only laugh awkwardly. "Okay, little Alexis. Just stay in school and teach. That weakling Fudge is no match for that bastard Albus." Perhaps sensing Alexis' embarrassment, Aberforth rolled his eyes and comforted him. "Don't you still want to summon the Order of the Phoenix?" Aberforth glanced at Alexis and saw that he looked serious, as if he was really considering the possibility of doing this, and couldn't help but said sourly, "Ha, our little Alexis has really grown up and started to care about people. I haven't seen you in a few years, and I don't know how our little Alexis is doing with his God-calling guard training. Can you show it to me later, Alexis?" Alexis can't use the God Guard, just like Christy likes Alexis, and he doesn't know it. It's almost everyone knows. Seeing the embarrassment on Alexis's face, Aberforth burst out laughing, and he slapped Alexis on the shoulder with a rough slap. "Okay, don't worry. All you have to do now is go back to school, sleep well, and then go to class and stare quietly. Maybe you can't sleep, you can stay at my place overnight, and I will tell you the continuation of the bedtime story of the evil dragon and Snow White." As he spoke, Aberforth winked at Alexis. "Alexis." When leaving the Pig's Head bar, it was already close to the school curfew. Alexis returned to the school along the passage of the Screaming Shack. After thinking about it, he decided to wait for news from Mundungus. The next day, Friday, early in the morning, Alexis got up early and ran to the office to wait for the news that Horn had brought back Mundungus. Today he only has one class in the afternoon, so he has plenty of time. Normally, he would fill in the observation records in the laboratory at this time, but today he seemed a little absent-minded and filled in the observation records in a mess. In the end, he simply put down the pen and concentrated on waiting for the news. Today's newspaper has arrived. Alexis flipped through the newspaper. There was no new news in the newspaper. Several large media outlets such as the Daily Prophet were still reading the news about yesterday's meeting, but this time the focus of the report had changed. The front page of the Daily Prophet used a very interesting headline. "Where is the line between black wizards and white wizards?" Alexis looked at the photos in the newspaper carefully. Dumbledore did not take the lead today. Side by side with him was the young Grindelwald. It seems that, because of the age of the photo, Alexis almost didn't recognize Grindelwald in the newspaper, and his photo, like the photos in the Muggle world, did not move. The newspaper seems to be hyping up the feud between Grindelwald and Dumbledore, but if you look closely at the article, you will find that the content does not involve much about Grindelwald. Instead, it still introduces yesterday's meeting and the transfer of the case to the authority. Things about Sangamo. This looks like a false report, and Grindelwald's photo seems to be just a media used to attract attention, and drive traffic. But Alexis remembered what Grindelwald had said to her. Any huge storm starts from a small thing. So Alexis, always pay attention to details. Alexis turned her attention to the newspaper again. The Yorkshire tragedy reminds me of the war decades ago. Yes, it was the battle between Gellert Grindelwald and Albus Dumbledore. We all have to admit that Grindelwald is an excellent wizard. That war was more like a battle of ideas between two talented wizards. At that time, Principal Dumbledore won the war and gained the entire wizarding world praise and support. So what about this time? The author does not know that. Before writing this article, I personally went to Yorkshire and saw the fragmented corpses one after another. Although they were all Muggle corpses, the author still couldn't help but think about what would happen if the lives of Muggles were wantonly persecuted and was acquitted by the Wizengamot. So what is the difference between this concept and Grindelwald decades ago? At least it seemed that Grindelwald only wanted to enslave them and did not want to slaughter them like livestock. We don't know who should be supported and how the trial should be carried out. Maybe the members of the Wizengamot have their own standards in mind, and maybe the members are also confused. No matter what the outcome is, I will continue to pay attention to and follow up on this incident. Now, compared to what has been said above, the author is also worried about another issue, whether the relationship between Principal Dumbledore and the British Ministry of Magic will continue to deteriorate. This will be something that affects the entire wizarding world. While Alexis was reading the newspaper repeatedly, the same report had been delivered to every wizard's dinner table by the newsboy, and all the teachers and students at Hogwarts had also seen this report. The issue of Dumbledore's strong stance at the meeting became the focus of discussion. Most of the students in Gryffindor House were indignant at this report, and they clamored to give the author of Beautiful Beetle a lesson. To Gryffindor, Dumbledore was not only the headmaster, but also their pride. The Ravenclaw students were discussing the contents of the newspaper. They seemed very rational, but a little out of place. The Hufflepuff students put the newspapers aside, and while the students from other houses were discussing the newspapers, they began to discuss the differences between today's breakfast and yesterday's breakfast. The students in Slytherin behaved the most weirdly. Some students were similar to Gryffindor. They firmly believed that Dumbledore was great and impartial, but the other group sneered. While holding newspapers, they even frequently raised their heads and looked defiantly at the Gryffindor table. Chapter 100. The incident is still unfolding. The Slytherin students' gazes made the Gryffindors very uncomfortable, and some hot-tempered little lions couldn't help but stare back. This move made the Slytherin snakes burst into laughter. "Put away your disgusting eyes," the little lion roared angrily. The whole restaurant fell silent. The Ravenclaws stared at the Gryffindor and Slytherin tables, put down their knives and forks, and waited for the development of the matter. The Hufflepuffs raised their heads and looked here and there with blank expressions. It was quite harmonious just now. What happened now? The Slytherins folded their arms, held their heads high, and continued to sneer. "Shit. Do you want me to dig your eyes out?" The little lion was furious, pushed the dinner plate, stood up suddenly, and shouted at the Slytherin table. A reckless man's anger cannot hide the fact. A Slytherin student shouted with a sneer. "You." The little lion was so angry that he was about to pull out his wand and take action. The entire Gryffindor table suddenly stood up. Seeing that the two houses were about to fight, Percy Weasley, the prefect of Gryffindor, stood up quickly and pulled the classmates around him to sit down. Unfortunately, not many people listened to his words, but looked in disbelief. Looking at him, his eyes were full of disappointment. "The school rules stipulate that you cannot." Percy muttered the school rules and came out with a sullen expression like a prefect, hoping to use his special status to restrain the angry little lions. "He is not my brother." Ron grabbed the old wand and covered his face. He felt that his whole face was burning, and he wanted to go underground. "Yo. Percy is so majestic." "That's right, TSK, Prefect Percy. He's really familiar with the school rules." George and Fred sang in harmony, and they turned their attention to Ron and Harry. "He probably copied it at least 100 times. Ron has copied it 50 times and still doesn't know it so well." Everyone knows that Ron and Harry were fined 50 times for violating school rules. Slytherin's prefect Gemma Farley is different from Percy. She is calm and stands between the two houses with her arms crossed, just like the other Slytherins. This is just their little trick. We don't need to pay attention to it and just wait quietly for things to develop further. Gemma Farley says, don't fight with them, we are noble Slytherins. The morale of the little lions was very high at first, but when Percy disturbed them, they became chaotic first. So, the other 3 houses of the school watched a wonderful Gryffindor internal conflict in the cafeteria, and it was too much addiction. The fuss was quickly put to an end by Professor McGonagall and Professor Snape, who came after hearing the news. Professor McGonagall was already in a bad mood because of Dumbledore's incident, but her expression became even worse when the students made such a fuss about her. Snape, on the other hand, still had his usual sullen expression, making it difficult to tell whether he was happy or angry. At noon, the 3 of them knocked on Alexis' office door. Alexis had heard about what happened in the restaurant. Mr. Alexis, we would like to ask, how is Principal Dumbledore doing now? Alexis brushed her hair a little irritably. Everything is fine, you don't have to worry. He said, the most important thing you should do now is go back to class. Today is Friday, we have no classes in the afternoon. Ron whispered. I remember that Harry joined the Gryffindor Quidditch team. The Quidditch team would have training matches every weekend. If there were no classes, they would go to training matches. Secret weapon, sir. Harry reminded. Then go practice flying, or review the textbook. Alexis sent the 3 of them away in the hallway. Things look a little bad. The 3 of them were discussing in low voices as they walked towards the library. Yes, Mr. Alexis is in a bad mood. He seems a little irritable, said Hermione. Her views were unanimously agreed upon by the other 2 friends. Harry, have you asked Neville? Hermione asked suddenly. After Alexis told them the story of Sirius Black before, they agreed to ask Neville for clarification when they returned. According to Alexis, there are 2 candidates for the prophecy's children. One is Neville and the other is Harry. Neville's birthday is indeed July 7th. Harry nodded and waited for the students passing by to move away before continuing. Then does he have any memories of his childhood? Harry shook his head. Neville's parents are both in St. Mungo's Hospital for magical injuries and injuries. This matter is not a secret. Everyone in the wizarding world knows it. Ron suddenly said. The 3 of them looked at each other and began to suspect that perhaps Voldemort had not chosen Harry from the second choice as Alexis said, but had taken action on both sides. Ron. Harry. 3 people were standing in the corner whispering when 2 shouts suddenly came from beside them, startling them. George, Fred. Ron slapped his chest and yelled for someone to come. George and Fred stood beside the 3 of them with smiles on their faces. You all saw what happened this morning, right? George asked. Of course we saw it. We are not blind. Ron rolled his eyes. We are going to do something. Do you want to come together? Doing what? George and Fred looked at each other and told each other their plans in a cryptic whisper. That's not good. Maybe you should talk to Percy about it. The 3 Harrys were a little worried. George and Fred's plan obviously violated the school rules. Copying the school rules in the past few days had made them all familiar with the school rules, and they were almost catching up with Percy Weasley. Percy? Oh, leave him alone. George and Fred waved their hands carelessly and looked at the 3 of them expectantly. Not long after sending Harry and the 3 away, Horn came back. Alexis couldn't wait to untie the letter and open it to read. Mundungus seemed to be in a hurry. There were many fragmentary notes in the envelope. Apparently, he sent them all to Alexis as soon as he obtained the information, without even having time to sort it out. The small piece of paper contains information about people related to intelligence, and the credibility is simply marked on it, but this credibility seems to be of little use. Most of them are words like heard, possible, seemed, and high probability. It was pretty good to be able to collect all of this in one night, and Alexis did not feel that Mundungus was careless. The notes contained information about the British Ministry of Magic, the Daily Prophet and several large media outlets, as well as several Wizengamot members, and a small number of rumors about the wizarding world in other regions. Finally, Mundungus specifically marked his views in red font. This does not seem to be purely for the Yorkshire tragedy. There seems to be some conspiracy brewing behind it. I'm already on my way back to London to get further information. I hope my guess is wrong. Please be careful. Also, can some of the interest on my arrears of 30,000 galleons be exempted? End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.